to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There he is.
Just broke the speed barrier.
How many,
Without getting a ticket.
Okay. I didn't hear any sirens.
You had that notice on the back of your ID card that would just tell me you're going heading off to the EOC.
Right. Welcome, folks.
Okay.
Public comments? Public comments.
Respect.
Comments, we'll move on then to the consent calendar. Do we have any motion to add any items to the consent calendar?
I'll make the motion to add 5.1 through 5.4 and 5.6 and 5.7 to the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Directors Huang,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Gunther.
Aye. Motion to approve consent calendar as amended.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Directors Huang,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Gunther.
Aye. Moving on, item 5.5.
Thank you, President Gunther. Item 5.5 involves a resolution authorizing submittal of a grant application and for the general manager to enter into a grant agreement with the California Department of Water Resources for the Alternative Update and Model Upgrade Project. And Manager of Water Resources, Laura Heides, will get us started, and we have a staff presentation on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Tonight's item relates to an opportunity that staff identified for a grant or a potential grant through the Sustainable Groundwater Management Grant Program administered through the Department of Water Resources for our Alternative Update and Model Upgrade Project. And so tonight we have with us a few special guests. Michelle Myers, our Manager of Groundwater Resources, will be here to provide a presentation with more details, and she is supported by her team members Mike Hallowell and Doug Young, who have been working hard on preparing for this grant opportunity. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Myers.
Thank you, Ms. Heides.
All right. A little bit of background as a refresher that the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was enacted in 2014 and changed the landscape of how groundwater is managed in California, and also referred to as SGMA. And the district is identified in SGMA as an agency created by statute to manage groundwater and is deemed to be the exclusive local agency within its statutory boundary to comply with SGMA. And the Niles Cone Groundwater Basin is ranked a medium priority basin and is therefore subject to SGMA. A medium priority basin is ranked based on a number of factors such as population, as well as reliance on groundwater and number of public supply wells. Medium and high priority basins are treated the same in SGMA. Couple of key dates to keep in mind is in November 2016, the district decided to become a groundwater sustainability agency, and later that same year decided to submit an alternative to a groundwater sustainability plan. And on July 17, 2019, the Department of Water Resources approved the district's alternative to a groundwater sustainability plan, also referred to as an alternative. So the map up on the screen shows the Niles Cone Basin boundary is the pink line as defined by the Department of Water Resources, and the district's groundwater statutory boundary is the blue solid line on the map. So the alternative reflects existing recognized authority and framework for management of groundwater and continues the district's existing groundwater management practices and programs, and preserves the successful sustainable management already being performed by the district. So in the district's alternative, it identified a few areas specifically related to the groundwater model where improvements could be made due to limitations from the existing model platform. The district has had great success with the existing model over the last 16 years. This success is due in part to work specifically performed by Mike Hallowell, who appends data such as pumping and recharge and rainfall every year in support of the survey report. However, since 2003, new code has improved the functionalities in simulating groundwater flow and the way it outputs the results, all of which is important for Sigma. As a result, upgrade of the district's grant model platform will help us better meet the requirements of Sigma, specifically related to accounting for sea level rise and in the evaluation of groundwater dependent ecosystems. So with the Department of Water Resources approval, they also had 7 recommended actions for the district for our alternative update, which is due January 1st, 2022, and it's every 5 years there's an update to the plan. So the first being to organize and consolidate our submitted materials, address climate change projections, some of which is actually already part of the planning document, but more specifically sea level rise. And the next 2 items are actually related, and those are to clarify surface water, groundwater interaction in both subbasins, and in doing so will help improve identification of potential groundwater dependent ecosystems. Another area is an improved discussion of the water quality monitoring and the results within the basin. Additional explanation of how the management of the gradient of the Newark aquifer impacts the Centerville, Fremont, and the deep aquifers, as well as an improved discussion related to the representative monitoring sites or the indicator wells that we use in the basin to check the health. A number of the recommendations will be informed by the model update and others through additional information and explanation. So the grant opportunity presented itself actually after the Department of Water Resources provided the alternative reviews. And they did that with the anticipation. They knew that they wanted people with approved alternative plans to be able to apply for grant funding. So incorporating the groundwater model upgrade project with the 7 recommended actions outlined by DWR in the district's alternative update would be cost effective and appropriate. So the grant applications are due November 1st, and the cost sharing is right now 75% or up to $500,000. So you'll see an asterisk on the slide. So right now it says up to $500,000 for alternative updates, but we're not sure if that also includes doing a model upgrade, so there's an opportunity for more additional funding. So we're looking into that. We have a call into the grant team at DWR, so we'll find out. And then the timing of the grant also coincides with the alternative 5-year update for when submittals are due to them, and they did that on purpose. So the estimated combined project cost is $1.2 million. So therefore, staff recommends by motion that the board adopt a resolution authorizing that an application be made to the California Department of Water Resources to attain a grant under the 2019 Sustainable Groundwater Management Grant Program Planning Round 3 grant pursuant to the Water Quality, Supply, and Infrastructure Improvement Act of 2014, Proposition 1, Water Code Section 79700, et sec, and or the California Drought, Water, Parks, Climate, Coastal Protection, and Outdoor Access for All Act of 2018, Proposition 68, Public Resources Code, Section 80,000, et sec, and to enter into an agreement to receive a grant for the alternative update and model upgrade project. And 2, authorizing and directing the general manager of Alameda County Water District or designee to prepare the necessary data, conduct investigations, file such application, and execute a grant agreement with the California Department of Water Resources. So with that being said, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Now, the questions I have, does the grant application allow for several different scenarios and changes in both regulatory and operations of the groundwater reservoir and groundwater basin specifically? I understand in draft, which may be issued, if not under this current administration and the next one, year and a half from now, a 3-foot increase in the elevations of water at the Golden Gate, raising the FEMA level from 11.5 feet to 14.5 feet. Second, we're discussing the use of the groundwater basin for depositing of water that could then be desalinated and sold to entities such as San Francisco. I believe the best choice of that is to import the water down Niles Canyon Aqueduct, which is not in our current planning, but hopefully it could be evaluated. There's some others that think recycled water at exorbitant costs could work. So how flexible is the program that you're asking grants money for?
So it's specifically tied to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So the list of identified tasks that would be approved would be updating the alternative update, so submitting that, installing new monitoring well networks. Improving models isn't specifically listed, but it's anticipated it is because that could then improve hydraulic models. So I think the projects that you've mentioned would not necessarily be included.
If there's a way to incorporate that in your grant application, I would strongly encourage you to do so, and I would think the motion by the board tonight to approve the application is not necessarily to the language of the application itself.
Michelle, the fact that we were going to do sort of an update to our model,
Yes.
I mean, the model itself could be used to potentially evaluate some of these scenarios, could it not?
It could, yes.
Right, so,
That's
and the model itself isn't eligible, we think, right now for the grant, but you guys are looking into that?
Right. Well, they have a list of potential projects, but it's not an exclusive list. So
Right.
we anticipate that there will be money. Yes, so it can definitely be evaluated. Mike might want to speak more to it, but yeah, the groundwater model can do different functionalities in testing, with sea level rise. That's the whole intent of upgrading
Right, so
the model.
So the point is that the model would be a useful tool, an updated model to evaluate some of these potential scenarios that you described.
Well, to the extent that you have flexibility in the implementation of your of the money should it come, please consider higher sea level rise. Look at the executive order of January 15, 2015, which talked about the 500-year, I think it was 500-year storm, and some of the other issues that are already in the books, but not necessarily tied into our current SGMA analysis and approval.
And we are in fact required to do that.
Yes.
Some of these tasks in our next update, on 5-year increments.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. Cool.
No questions.
I actually have a curiosity question.
Okay.
So how are you going to quantify the groundwater surface water interaction? Is it through modeling?
It will be a combination
gotta be-
of a support study that
Okay.
will involve assessing which surface water bodies are likely interacting with groundwater, particularly the regional aquifers that could be affected by our operations, our recharge operation, or pumping from major aquifers. And then it'll be also, the modeling will work with that,
Okay.
because that'll give us kind of the basis to quantify, but it's also through the calibration step that we would kind of help perhaps validate some preliminary conclusions from a study that would go out and look at ponds, either through existing data, or various other methodologies.
Okay. No, I was just curious because from the list that Michelle mentioned of eligible projects,
Right.
the wells are for validation of your model and perhaps improvement of the models.
Right.
But from that list, I just couldn't quite tease out how are we going to get there.
The model will be equipped with zone budgeting that will
Okay.
address quantifying surface water, and it'll also have variable specified head boundary conditions that can rise with sea level rise,
Okay.
and that's a critical improvement in the model platforms today relative to the IGSM code that we last upgraded in 2003. So we've had 16 years with the current model, had a good ride with it, but it's time for bringing these additional functionalities that will
So,
do the job.
so the encouragement here is if there are other projects that you think would dovetail, we should try to apply for grant, just combine it with a grant and see what happens, right?
Yeah, so one of the things that will probably come out, we've already tried to identify what we could, and we're listing those as tasks in the grant, and we're still working on that. But part of this project, there probably will be a list of data gaps that will probably come out. And we've already done a lot of work already looking at the groundwater-dependent ecosystems and already identifying ones that we know that they aren't, just because, like, for instance, Dry Creek itself, groundwater significantly deeper than the creek itself. So they're not talking to each other that way. So, but yes, there will be additional things that will come into light, I'm sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
One more question. Technical question. Might the model, either currently or in the future, predict, identify and predict artesian conditions and increased areas of liquefaction, saturation areas?
We'll be able to predict the groundwater heads all throughout the basin. And as far as identifying liquefaction itself is something we might have to look into a little bit. Some of these models do, for example, do predict subsidence. If you set them up that way, we'd have to evaluate. We certainly can look at groundwater heads. That's definitely a given there. As far as using it for possible, other uses, other applications, in addition to some of the core Sigma things, is something that opportunity is maybe presented by having an upgrade of our groundwater model. So there might be some geotechnical work that you would do, but that could potentially be another tool in the toolbox that could be helpful.
Risk of keep going here. The USGS has some proposed predictions on subsidence.
Right.
So I assume that will be cranked in there. But the saturation and the rising of the groundwater levels, both there and also the areas where we've put in buried utilities, and now which were in the VACO zone, and now will be with below the groundwater table in the future years potentially. The ability to recognize that may be helpful in our construction practices.
Yes, and being able to address sea level rise will, I think, be a part of that. So having the best, good groundwater model and upgrade can only help those kinds of initiatives.
All right, thank you.
No further comments or questions. I'd just like to thank staff. It's great to be in this position, to be trying to do this. It's your hard work that got us here. Thank you. I think it's going to help. We have a motion, or we have a recommendation. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Directors Huang?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Sethy?
Aye.
Weed?
Aye.
And Gunther?
Aye.
Thank you.
5.8.
5.8.
Thank you, President Gunther. 5.8 involves a resolution awarding contract for the board chambers and multipurpose room audiovisual upgrades project, and Mr. Stevenson will give us a ride.
Yes. Buckle up. Thank you. The board chambers and multipurpose room audiovisual upgrades project will replace the AV and recording systems in the board chambers and update select AV equipment and recording systems in the multipurpose room. In addition to bringing the board chambers AV system up to current AV standards and improving audio coverage throughout the space, the project will simplify and standardize user interfaces and controls for operating the AV systems and recording processes in the board chambers and the MPR. Bids to perform the work were recently received, opened, and evaluated. The low bid contained one minor irregularity which may be waived. There's adequate funding in the project budget for this expenditure, and the project was reviewed with the Engineering and Information Technology Committee on July 17, 2019. The project will help meet the district's strategic plan goal number 5, promote clear and open communication, outreach, and engagement with customers and communities. And so we'll be, as part of this project, we'll be replacing the AV systems here in the board chambers. That includes the sound system, finally, all the microphones, the sound equipment in the closet and so forth, but also the projectors, the screens, the speakers, and the cameras, the camera that's in the back of the room here, and also install another camera here that can be used to record presenters and folks at the podium. Importantly, to replace the recording system itself so that it's much easier to operate. And we'd use the same recording system in the MPR and make some additional improvements in the MPR as well. So it's a real upgrade for both spaces. So staff's recommendation is by motion. 1, waive the minor irregularity in the Conti Corporation DBA Conti MEP Corporation bid. And 2, adopt a resolution awarding the contract for the board chambers and multipurpose room audiovisual upgrades project to Conti Corporation DBA Conti MEP Corporation in the amount of $179,333, job 21271. And I'd be happy to address any questions.
I just have one.
Yes.
Will you be replacing the board directors at the same time?
It's not in the project scope.
There is an app I saw on the meeting where you can put funny faces, ears, and other things on the people as they're speaking, and they did that at a formal meeting and broadcasted in Eastern Europe. It was well received. Are we at a point where the chambers might become a revenue source for the district and renting it out for various entities? I look here, most times this room is not utilized a great deal, and it strikes me there may be an enterprise opportunity.
Well, we do use it for more than just board meetings. We do use it for training and other meetings, and in fact these system upgrades would be helpful for those. Certainly there's nothing about this project that would prohibit that expansion of use.
Yeah, and hopefully encourages it. Yeah, thank you.
I believe we're going to be in competition with the Chase Center, but there might be some concerts that are available. I heard, is the Blue Oyster Cult still around? I think
They might be able to sell out in here.
People wouldn't be sitting, they'd be standing. I also noticed that our dressing rooms and our stand-in spots and makeup room is not here.
That's a different project.
With no further comments, get myself in any more trouble. Do we have a motion for the staff recommendation?
I'll make the motion.
A motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Secretary, call the roll.
Sure. Director Huang,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Gunther.
All right. Moving on. 5.9.
Thank you, President Gunther. There's been recent state legislation that afforded us an opportunity to evaluate some of our existing policies, and Mr. Wunderlich will be describing staff's recommendation pertaining to a resolution adopting proposed board collection and residential water service termination policy.
Great, thank you. Yes, right now we actually work without a formal board policy on this. There are existing state laws that we follow and staff, guidelines that staff put into place. But State of California, Chapter 891, Statutes of 2018, SB 998, specifies certain requirements that water providers must follow prior to disconnecting a residential customer service for non-payment. The proposed district board collection and residential water service termination policy updates current procedures for the collection of delinquent accounts, including notifications, fee assignments, and discontinuation of service to comply with SB 998 and other laws. The proposed policy has been reviewed by General Counsel and was presented to the Finance Committee on September 17, 2019. This report will be supplemented with a staff presentation, and approval of this policy will help achieve Strategic Plan Goal 3, improve the district's financial stability and transparency. Now, in reviewing the board packet, I did identify one small change that we needed to make to the resolution that was in the packet, and so I've circulated copies of the updated resolution to the board members and also placed them on the back table for the public. And I'll explain what that change is as we go through the presentation. All right. So first, just to provide an overview of our collection activity, our bad debt for fiscal year 2018-19 was only 0.24% of water bills. So this is really not a significant problem for the district. Our customers are very, very good about paying their water bills. And we do not anticipate the requirements of SB 998 to have a significant impact on the amount of bad debt we experience. As of September 2019, we did have about 3,000 accounts past due, with a median overdue balance of just under $130. To me, what this means is you have folks maybe a week or two late on paying one water bill. So it's not a situation of multiple bills accumulating, because that is about our typical bill amount, about $125 to $130. Looking at some of the activity, the final notice is the final written notice that we send customers about 2 weeks before they would be disconnected. We do send out about 1,000 of those per month over the past fiscal year. The door tag, so that's when we put the tag directly on the customer's door, letting them know that they're about to be disconnected. We do about 400 of those per month. These efforts are very effective at getting customers to pay their bills, because during the past fiscal year we only processed 508 service terminations for non-payment. To give you a sense of the scale, we issue about 500,000 water bills in a year. So that means only 1 in 1,000 water bills leads to an eventual disconnection for non-payment. And then customers are very good about then getting current when that occurs, and so we only had fewer than 10 instances of a disconnection without a reconnection within the next week or so. Typically, when there's a disconnection that's not reconnected, it means that the customer's already moved out of the property. They've maybe figured out how they can game the system to not pay a bill and get moved out before the service is turned off.
Is it appropriate to ask questions as you go through, or wait until you finish?
Anytime.
Approximately 5,000 door tags. Is that when we charge the door tag fee?
Yes. So, I guess let me just back up just a little bit, but I'll get to the answer. Not included here is how many $5 late fee notices we send out. That is a fairly significant volume. So there's a $5 fee associated with that initial late fee that's mailed out. There is no fee with the final written notice. There is a $20 fee with the door tag. There's another $20 fee with the service termination, and then it is a $44 fee for the reconnection.
The approximate number of $5
approximately 10% of bills are paid late, so that is a pretty significant.
8,000.
Yeah, when we had instituted that $5 fee, we had hoped that that would encourage customers to pay on time, and we would see fewer of those. Unfortunately, we haven't really seen much of a change. I think the $5 fee is not really enough to motivate behavior change.
So is that 8,000 times 6, which would make it almost 50,000?
I'm sorry.
We have about 84,000 bills. When you say 10% each cycle are late.
Correct.
So it's running around somewhere around 60,000 $5 fees we're charging.
About 50,000. Yeah, over the course of a year. We are fairly flexible with customers, especially ones with a good history of doing one $5 fee waiver per year on an account. So we don't necessarily collect the number that are issued.
And we also use that as an opportunity to encourage customers to get on automatic bill payment, which we hope will also reduce the number of late charges.
With automatic bill payments, the number is not 8. It's still 50,000 with automatic bill payment. So the number then that are making payments is a much higher percentage than 10%. If you take out the automatic bill payment,
Sure, yeah, if you take out the automatic bill payment, it maybe jumps up to 15%, something like that.
I thought we had a very high automatic bill payment.
We have about 25% of our customers are on auto pay.
Okay, so
And it's going up.
It is going up. It's actually gone up about, this time a year ago it was about 20% of our customers. We're up to about 25% now.
Okay, so 12%. That's where we are. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So just a little overview of SB 998. It was signed by Governor Brown last September, and it sets some new restrictions on when you can terminate residential service. A couple of the biggest issues are it requires that a bill must now be 60 days past due before you can turn off service, and it also has some additional provisions in SB 998 specifically for low-income customers, such as offering payment arrangements. It applies to individually metered residential service, and it does require water districts to develop a policy and be in compliance by February 1st of next year. So just to provide a brief overview of what is in the proposed district policy before you this evening. First is that we plan on treating all customers the same. And so what that means is the certain provisions available to low-income customers, such as payment arrangements, we propose to make that available to all customers. That's been our standard practice, and we don't see a need to change that. It also gets us out of the situation of, when a customer is just barely over the income threshold and those kinds of things. One item, too, is with payment arrangements, we would only offer one payment arrangement at a time. So if a customer is currently on an arrangement to get caught up with a past due bill, they would need to stay current on all of their future bills, so they couldn't then add to that arrangement if they are struggling with future bills. The policy includes the timeline of customer notifications, also our process for return payments and appeals. I also want to point out that the very last stop in the appeals process would be the Board of Directors. And so it could be that, I think this would be very rare, but it could be that on occasion there will be an item in a board packet for a customer appeal. And although the law doesn't require us to be effective until February 1st, we're proposing January 1st. So now I'll just review the collection timeline. A bill is issued day 1. That bill covers water that's been used for the past 60 days because we bill every other month. It's due on day 21. We would send a late fee notice on day 28. Right now, actually, we only provide one kind of free day before we do the late notice, so this adds a little bit of time for customers against the initial due date. On day 38, disputes would be due. And then there's a little bit of a time period where there's not much going on in terms of collection activity, and that's by design to make sure we have time to resolve any disputes before we would get to the next steps. And actually, I'm sorry, I talked right over the one change. The one change in what was handed out this evening compared to what was in the board packet was changing the late fee date from day 31 to day 28. And that's designed to make sure customers get plenty of notification on their deadline to submit a dispute, which is on day 38. And so then it's not until day 67 that the final notice is mailed, and then a week later. We're still calling it a 48-hour tag because of a reference to 48-hour notice requirements in other state laws, but that would go out approximately a week before disconnection. The only thing that's a new process that we're proposing is that on day 80, the day before disconnection, we would add a courtesy call from customer service staff to the customer. Everything else is a process that exists currently. We've only changed the timelines or spread the timelines out a little bit to comply with the requirements of SB 998.
To clarify, the 48-hour tag, would it say that they only have 48 hours? Or
No,
would actually-
it would include the day of disconnection, which would be a week later.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something we're very conscious of in customer service, that we don't want to kind of give fake deadlines to customers or kind of, statements that we're going to disconnect their service when we're not actually going to do that. So our staff recommendation is by motion, adopt the resolution as handed out this evening, approving the collection and residential water service termination policy, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have some very short comments. First of all, this was reviewed in the Finance Committee, so I'm supportive of the staff recommendations. But I would like to caution about one area here where we have appeals to the board.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen any appeals to the board in my experience on the board so far. But I have seen it abused at other board meetings. For example, at East Bay Mud, I've been at a couple of board meetings where I think in 2 instances that I was there, they had like a dozen or 16 appeals being made, really which I felt was abuse of board time and should have been handled by management. Also, in looking at other board agendas from around the Bay Area, principally East Bay Mud, Zone 7, Santa Clara, that process of appeal to the board can really be abused. And so I'm willing to go forward with the process as recommended, but if it is abused in the future and I'm still on the board, I'm going to highlight that.
If it's any reassurance, the 3 years I spent at my prior water district had a process that ended with the board. There were 0 appeals to the board during those 3 years.
Yeah, you were lucky, we've been lucky so far, but I have seen it abused at other water districts.
Yeah, so I will also add, and Mr. Miyake may wish to add some comments, but this is feedback that came from him as far as being a legal requirement that the board is the end of the process with the formal appeals process.
Mm-hmm.
And we also built into the policy that the finance manager is, the first level of appeal, but he does that in consultation with the general manager. So we will try to make sure that if it can be addressed, that we will do so. I do agree that, it's difficult for a board to deal with these kind of issues.
I recall that we've had, a handful of incidents that have come to the board in private session where we've had to try to negotiate with the party and everything like that. But, I would hate to see that process abused at the board level.
Yeah, and we have, over my tenure as general manager, made some modifications in terms of how we deal with these kind of disputes that I think have been very effective, and I don't recall any disputes coming to the board in the last couple of years. There was this one lady, but she was extremely challenging.
I can tell you, at a couple of East Bay Mud meetings, when you get a dozen or 16 people coming up to the podium and abusing the board's time for an hour and a half, it can become ridiculous. So I just don't want to get into that situation.
Right, and just to clarify, it is a requirement in the statute that the final stop for appeals on residential water service terminations is the board. It's not in SB 998, by the way. It's in another statute that's been in existence for a while, so this has been a statutory requirement that is not new. What's new is we have to have a policy, and we have to specify it in the policy, if that helps.
Okay. I have made numerous comments in the past of how frustrated I was with what I thought was inefficient methodology of billing and collecting funds. It's good to have it documented now as to what our policies are. Excuse me. Hopefully someday we'll get to the 0 tier where many of the people will never see a bill. Second, that we'll decouple the meter reading and billing cycle, that the 21-day is not a norm, and somewhat awkward because people think of in terms of monthly payments due on a specific date in the month, where in our case it's somewhat random based on when the bill is sent. I think we'd benefit, and we could do it now, is to start billing monthly, decouple the idea that you have to send a bill with a specific meter read every 2 months if you wish, but if you were at every 4 months, you'd save money and wouldn't have much impact because the use is very consistent for the great majority of users. That in lieu of fees for late notices, that we work out a system where we charge an interest for unpaid bills and collect that money as part of the billing process. Particularly if it was on a monthly billing process, you'd have more money coming in and less impact in the drama of a fine or a penalty to the customer. That's more in the mindset of an enterprise operation. So the more we can become an enterprise district, the better off we'll be. We've got a long ways to go. I'm not going to oppose this because I think it's a step, but it's on a awkward policy basis. Thank you. A necessarily awkward policy basis.
Okay. Further comments, questions?
No questions.
I actually have a question regarding, so the bill is delinquent at 21 days. Have we done any research into how long it takes the bill to get to the customer once it's mailed? I.e., I mean, we have a relatively large service area. I know my mail service in Union City is pretty darn good, actually. But the question is, how about Hayward residents? Are there areas in Fremont, Hayward, where it may take upwards to 7 days to receive a bill?
We actually have done some analysis on that because occasionally we do run into situations where maybe it takes a customer 5 or 6 days to get their bill, and then at that point they maybe only have 15 days before it's due. And what happens on occasion, because the southern end of our service area, I believe, gets their mail sorted through San Jose and then up into Fremont, and the northern end gets it from Oakland down into Union City and maybe northern Fremont. And sometimes one of those ends is a little more efficient than the other. So yes, that is something that we have looked at in the past. We have not seen situations where it takes more than a week, so customers are still going to get, at least about 15 or so days before it would be due. And with the adjustments we're proposing this evening, customers have more time before a late fee will be applied, so it kind of helps cover some of that too.
So we push the late fee adjustment, it looks like, out about a week.
Yes.
Okay.
I have one more
I had
comment.
heard some feedback from a customer in Hayward. You probably may know the guy, regarding the late fee and the time period, and it looks like we're adjusting a little bit back, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and I can assure you that our customer service staff have heard the same feedback, and it's one of the reasons we also, once per year, try to be fairly lenient with customers about a late fee waiver. Now that we're adding additional time before that applies, we'll probably start getting a little less lenient, but we still, in the policy, have said that for customers who routinely pay on time, we'll still do it once per year.
It'll be interesting to see, I'd be curious to see if we see a reduction by the increase of the extra week. That might be an interesting thing to look at.
We will definitely be able to track the data on that.
If I might, I don't have a water bill in front of me, but I don't recall seeing on the water bill a statement saying that if not paid by a certain date, there'll be a $5 late fee attached, and if we have to by another date, you will provide a door tag at a cost of $20, and termination another $20, and reconnection $44. Is that in the text on the bill, and might we consider putting it out there if it's not?
An excellent question. I will have to look at the bill myself to see what exactly is on there in regards to those fees. I do know there's a lot of print on the back side of the bill that includes a lot of this kind of information. When we did initially implement those late fees about 2.5 years ago, we did put them into the rate and fee schedule, and we did do a fair amount of customer outreach at that time to inform customers. But with SB 998, we're going to be making or taking a look at all of our notifications and what's on there, because we do need to reference the policy and provide the website address for customers to take a look at it. So I'll make sure we take a look at what level of detail is also provided about those levels of late payment fees.
And also a statement saying that you please call and for consideration of for consultation and consideration
Yes.
of waiver. Thank you.
Further comments, questions? Okay, I believe we have a staff recommendation here.
Since this came to the Finance Committee, I'll make this motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Sure. Directors Huang,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Judy,
Aye.
and Gunther.
Aye. Moving on to reports.
So staff was not planning on making any presentations on reports, but the board committee reports and operational reports are in your packet. We'd be happy to respond to any questions.
I think I read the hardness report again. Thank you for the staff. I think they've caught on to what hardness meter I am probably close to, as I've noticed it went down. So I do, and I think the residents of Union City thank you as well. Not to mention North Fremont. Comments furthermore? No? Then we're into staff presentations.
We have no staff presentations for the board this evening.
I believe we're on to our general manager's report.
Yes, we have 2 items on the agenda and 2 sort of late-breaking items after that that we want to give the board some information about. So the first item is sale of the N3 Cattle Ranch property, an update of that. So the board, I'm sure, recalls that at the September 12th regular board meeting, I provided a briefing on the N3 Cattle Ranch property offering, and as a reminder, I provided background information on the property itself and reviewed possible ACWD interests with the board, including watershed protection, water rights, the possible establishment of a conservation or mitigation land bank, or either the reoperation or reconfiguration of Lake Del Valle. And then after some board discussion, the board agreed that I should do the following 3 items. Number 1 was contact the property owner's representative, and that's Todd Renfrew of California Outdoor Properties, and inquire if the owners would be willing to piecemeal the sale of the property. There was an interest among some of the board members to possibly limit ACWD's participation to areas in which ACWD may have direct interest. For example, potential property areas that could be inundated in future years by either increasing reservoir storage volumes, either through the reoperation of the existing Del Valle reservoir or by constructing additional facilities. The second item that the board asked me to look into was reach out and schedule a meeting with the general managers of Contra Costa Water District, Valley Water and Zone 7, as well as an upper manager from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission to determine if the water agencies share any interest on the N3 Cattle Ranch property. And then the third item was reach out to the Department of Water Resources and determine if there is any interest in their part. So I've been busy since the September 12th board meeting. On September 17th, I spoke with Todd Renfrew. Again, he's the owner's rep and the firm that is marketing the property. And here's what I learned. He indicated that to date there has been significant interest in the property. He's received several inquiries and possibly a couple of informal offers, but he wasn't specific about that. The property owners are definitely not interested in piecemealing the sale of the property. They want one comprehensive transaction for the whole property. Third is, I learned then that there is a coalition of environmental groups, as well as others, seeking to purchase the property, and he suggested that I speak with them and provided me with the contact information. And he also just mentioned that, in his view, the N3 Ranch is a very rugged, remote area and would likely never be intensively developed. On September 19th, I followed up and spoke with Brendan Moriarty. He represents the Trust for Public Land of the San Francisco Bay Area. And I also spoke with him again today just to see if there was any new information. Here's what I know so far. The Trust for Public Land and the Nature Conservancy are working to assemble a coalition to develop a funding package to acquire the property in fee. So they have several members of the coalition that they've formed so far. This includes the Trust for Public Land, the Nature Conservancy, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. They're interested in approximately 10,000 acres of the property that are in the sort of Calaveras Dam watershed area. Alameda County, East Bay Regional Park District, Santa Clara County Parks, California Wildlife Conservation Board, and an unnamed private foundation. I don't know who that is. Could be the Park District Foundation. I don't know. According to Mr. Moriarty, they believe, this is the coalition, that they are in the hunt, and so far has demonstrated to the owner that they are the most serious buyer at this point. The coalition's vision is to create California's next big park and to provide a backcountry experience for visitors. In their vision, the property would be owned and operated by a couple of park agencies, presumably East Bay Regional Park District and Santa Clara County Parks Department, or owned by the coalition and somehow jointly operated. And access and maintenance, they feel, of the N3 Ranch property could be through Lake Del Val Park, because the property abuts the park area. As a reminder, the asking price is $72 million. As of today, the coalition believes they've secured something in the low to mid $40 million range in funding commitments, and they're looking for more. They do think the property is overpriced, and they're getting it appraised. They feel that the appraisal, they have already started the appraisal work with a firm, and it's scheduled to be completed in a couple of weeks. Now, they offered this to me on their own, but similar to the realtor's opinion, they do not see their competition for the acquisition of the property to be developers. They think that the property may be attractive to wealthy property trophy hunters. They're soliciting state involvement, specifically working with State Senator Steve Glazier's office. That's the 7th District. The 7th District encompasses land east of ACWD's service area, kind of almost abuts. Much of the N3 Ranch is in the 7th District. They tried to get a line item in the state budget this year, but were unsuccessful. They feel that they had a lot of support for what they're trying to do, but they were too late in the process. They still think that the state is very interested and may ultimately participate. As I mentioned, SFPUC is interested in about 10,000 acres, and they're in the coalition. My guess, although I don't know this for sure, is that they are part of the $40 million plus commitment in some way. The coalition is looking at acquiring an option to purchase the property. But they figure it would take about 18 months to secure all the funding from the various parties. So they're looking at a relatively lengthy option period. Then I went on vacation, so I was away from September 23rd to September 30th. On October 1st, ACWD staff completed a map that shows potential reservoir inundation scenarios. So this would be if you operated Lake Del Val either at the top of the existing spillway, which is the glory hole, or at the top of the dam crest. So specifically, I asked staff to evaluate that to see how much of the N3 property itself would be flooded in either of those scenarios, because that conceivably would show some range of operation. And it's not a huge area. So if you operate currently at the current top of the dam crest, it would be about 55 acres of land that would be flooded in the N3 property. If you operate at the top of the spillway, which is lower than the crest, it'd be only about 3 acres, and I'm rounding. Staff nor I did not evaluate either of the other 2009 CDM report options, which were building a dam upstream of the existing Lake Del Val, or the other option was to put a dam basically in the middle of the existing reservoir so that you could have two sort of reservoir elevations. Both, I think, partially those options were looked at to not impact East Bay Regional Park District, their park there. We didn't really evaluate that. It would require a much more comprehensive evaluation. But I'm sure the board remembers that the dollars per acre foot for water supply for either of those options were pretty high, between $12,000 and $110,000 per acre foot. So that's why those options have not been pursued for a possible water supply project for ACWD since then. On October 1st, I was able to schedule a meeting with Contra Costa Water District, SFPUC, Valley Water, and Zone 7, the GMs and Steve Ritchie from SFPUC. And here's where that stands. In the meeting, Jerry Brown, General Manager of CCWD, indicated that Contra Costa Water District owns approximately 4,000 acres of conservation land south of Coral Hollow Road and west of 580 in San Joaquin County. And that was purchased as a mitigation measure for the Los Vaqueros Reservoir Expansion Project in 2012. So this property, formerly called the Echelette Ranch, I think that's how you pronounce it, is managed according to a habitat conservation plan approved by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So one thing that the general managers discussed was we should put together a map that shows that property, the N3 Ranch, Zone 7's property around Lake Del Val. They acquired 5,000 acres a few years ago. And then the property, the portion of N3 Ranch that San Francisco PUC is interested in. And I just saw the first version of that map that came out of engineering today. And one initial impression is we thought that CCWD's property might be in reasonable proximity to the N3 Ranch. It's pretty far away, actually. But it's good information.
It's on the very back side of entering Tracy, coming through the canyon over the hill.
Right.
I'm familiar with that property.
Yeah. But when we were sitting there in the meeting, as a bunch of general managers, we have trouble visualizing this thing, and we thought it would be good to put a map together, which is almost near complete. And I have a meeting with the same individuals scheduled on Monday. We have a Bay Area Water BAYWAC meeting, and so I'm going to be bringing this maps, and we'll be further talking. That was the plan. During the meeting, in sort of a brainstorming session, the water agencies agreed that we have an interest in possibly doing an ecological evaluation of the N3 Ranch property. And in the spirit of the whole bar effort, the concept would be that maybe portions of the property may be developed into a regional mitigation land bank. And we discussed this on September 12th. Everybody thought that that was potentially a good idea. Even San Francisco independently has brought up that concept with the property owners. But for a number of reasons, the property owners are not excited about having that evaluation done. Because if there are endangered species found, they don't want to know. We also discussed the potential inundation of the N3 Ranch property from operating Del Val at higher elevations. The three SBA GMs acknowledged that operating at a spillway or top of crest would be a pretty big lift for our agencies given the park district's interests. We did create a map, I'd be happy to pass it around, that shows how the park would be inundated under any of those scenarios. And it's pretty apparent, I think, that there isn't really an obvious place to relocate the park that would give the same sort of features if we did that. And I mentioned that we're still working on that map that shows the proximity of these lands. And based on the meeting with the general managers, I decided not to reach out to DWR yet. We wanted to have another meeting of the GMs with this additional information before we do that. So at this point, I think I should stop. This is my report. It would probably best to see if their board members have any questions at this point. And perhaps you would like to share your thoughts and ideas with each other. Apart from that, I did sort of develop some ideas for potential next steps, which if the board is interested in hearing, I could share that after your discussion. So I'll stop there. I know that was a lot of information, but what I'm trying to do here is, it became apparent to me that there's different opinions on the board, and I'm trying to be responsive and hopefully find common ground for the board to agree upon. But I'll stop, and it's important that you have an opportunity to talk with each other, and then we can go from there.
May I ask of the board president a process question here of the general manager too? How long will it take to have the other GM reports? Because I think this could be an extensive conversation on this one topic.
The other GM reports are just informational.
Could we have those first and then come back?
It's the board's pleasure.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Okay, so I can go through the next item, which is the the Quarry Lakes Parkway. You might be thinking, what is the Quarry Lakes Parkway? The Quarry Lakes Parkway is the east-west connector roadway. It has a new name now.
It doesn't connect.
And I just wanted to let the board know that I recently received notification from the City of Union City that this project, again, is alive and it's been renamed. It's the Quarry Lakes Parkway, and it's the roadway that connects, in 84, really, but the new road is from Paseo Padre Parkway to Mission Boulevard. So it's intended to sort of connect the 84 corridor to Mission Boulevard.
6th Street or something like that?
Yeah. Remember, there was a right-of-way for some parkway at one point. That was changed to making improvements to Dakota Road and Paseo Parkway, and then there'll be a new roadway built from Paseo Padre to Mission boulevard that involves 3 bridges over Old Alameda Creek and the current Alameda Creek. And I also want to remind the board that ACWD owns a landlocked parcel which this roadway would go through, which would take some of our land. But the proposed roadway would also provide access to the property, and we've worked with Union City over the years to kind of move it to one side to maximize the value of the district property. And if the roadway does get built, it addresses a couple of issues, including we are struggling with homeless encampments in that area, and it also could allow ACWD to sell the surplus and sell the property that we have, which also would be potentially beneficial to the district. So Union City has indicated that they plan to meet with us and give us a briefing, and we're interested in knowing more about what the current project looks like. They also notified us that they will be requesting ACWD to submit a letter in support of the project. And then our letter of support would then be incorporated into a presentation that city staff would be making at the Alameda County Transportation Commission in early 2020, presumably for funding. Obviously, staff would not submit a letter unless we receive the briefing and we assure ourselves that are comfortable with the project. So just wanted to mention that. We would keep the LICA committee informed, I think, at this point, although depending on the timing and who's on the committees, I guess that could change. And if the board's interested, we could bring the whole thing to the board. But that's the current plan.
I have a couple of comments. Are you complete?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, for the citizens of Union City, and I'm sure President Gunther is aware of this, this is one of the most controversial things splitting the community right now. And one factor is that it involves the last piece of farm property right off Isherwood and near Niles Alvarado right there. I personally am concerned about that land, that farmland going away, but I'm expressing that just personally myself, don't have any district objections here. Number 2, the surplus property that we have available, I believe from past meetings that I've been in, committee meetings, may be available for building housing units on it. Mm-hmm. So that makes it a very desirable piece of property, very valuable, especially with the creek running right by it and everything, you know, as a view property. And so I would hope that as we talk to Union City, that we try to maximize as much as possible the value of that property and what we might recoup from it.
Yeah, that's always been our intention. And in fact, Union City has been very, very cooperative in that regard, and I believe they have rezoned the property to be residential as part of this. So I think we're on the same page.
Lastly, I'll mention that our newly elected BART board representative for our area is vehemently leading the charge against what Union City is doing. So we need to be aware of the politics of the situation. Our supervisors are involved, our state representatives as well. This is as messy a sort of thing as the Navigation Center for Fremont, but it's going over on in Newark right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I am aware of some of these issues, but certainly not all. That's why I wanted to provide this quick briefing to the board and shake the bushes a little bit and see what comes out. And you're showing me some of the stuff that's coming out.
Well, if you're on one side, you've got half the town against you. If you're on the other side, you've got the other half of the town against you.
All right. So I'm hearing that maybe as this further develops, we'll be back before the full board.
I don't at this time support a letter. I think, as Director Sethy pointed out, this is a hot-button issue, and not just Union City. Multiple years ago, when we actually started our development of Quarry Lakes Park, as Director Weed will remember, we had people in the district, pretty much a full boardroom, waving Silent Spring at us and various other things. The only thing they didn't like more than the park was this road. I understand we might benefit from it, and our property would become more valuable, but I think at this point it might behoove us to stay on the sideline. I don't think we have to be involved. It is a very contentious issue. Director Sethy's correct. I don't believe our BART director is a proponent of this development, of this property, of this road. The city witnessed with the Masonic Home development an interesting political situation there, where a small contingent of people, including herself, basically defeated a large, huge dollar value proposition. I don't know where this is going to go. I understand, yes, there's definitely a homeless problem over there. I think we may get dragged into, that could become a very big problem for us. There's also a very big traffic problem there. There's the traffic getting over Paseo Padre, or going from Dakota. The only other option is Isherwood. And anybody trying to go over to the other side at rush hour, it's not quite as bad as Niles Canyon Road, or as bad as maybe Mission going to Niles Canyon, but it's pretty intense. And that's part of the problem here, is this does offer an access to get from Paseo to Mission. That said, all that they're going to do is move much more traffic onto Mission and down Niles Canyon. So I don't know how my representatives over in Union City feel at the council level on this. I just know I don't think it's in our best interest at this point to put forward a letter of support. I think we could stay, I'm not for it, I'm not against it. Part of me says, I don't want to see it built. Part of me says, boy, that would be nice to have another way to get across. Over to, not Mission, but over to just Union City. But you're right, it's a contentious issue over there. I think at this point we stay on the sidelines.
Okay.
See how it plays out.
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll find out more information about the project. We'll report back to the board. Obviously, there's a number of options at your disposal. Stay on the sidelines, submit a letter not opposing, submit a letter in support. I mean, so I appreciate the input, and will proceed accordingly and carefully. Okay? Any other thoughts about this item? Okay. I thought the board would be interested in hearing about the district's recent experiences with our power provider, as well as a water main break, and operations and maintenance manager, Kurt Arenz, will provide you a brief update on those two issues.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver, and good evening, President Gunther, members of the board. Just two quick items. The first being PG&E's Public Safety Power Shutoff program, which has been leading the news the last couple of nights. As you know, their schedule kept getting pushed back as the days wore on, but then late last night they began de-energizing parts of Alameda County, and soon after midnight we lost power to our Canyon Heights tank, Canyon Heights booster station, as well as the Alameda Creek monitoring station. So those are the only three accounts so far that we've identified that have lost power. In anticipation of the power loss, we had been keeping the tanks full, so when the power went out we had about a day's supply of storage in the tank, which gave us plenty of time to respond. And we had also staged a generator at water treatment plant number 2, getting in a close location ready to respond. So that happened first thing this morning. We brought out the generator, got the pump station running in the booster pump station, And our plan is to run the generator and booster pump station during the day to fill the tank, and then use that tank over the evening to supply the system, and then just repeat that as needed until the power is restored, which we hope will be fairly soon. So that's it. If you don't have any questions, the other item I just want to give you a very quick update is, because things are never too boring in operations, we also had a contractor hit a water main yesterday afternoon on Fremont Avenue. This required us to isolate the leak and interrupt service to some customers between West Warren and Landing Parkway, if you're familiar with that area. So it's just south of 880, not too far from here. So that happened yesterday. It was a very deep location. It's at a creek crossing, so the pipeline is very deep. Lots of other utilities. There's fiber optic lines and storm drains. And it took till this afternoon to actually excavate down and locate the leak. So currently, as we speak, they should be shoring the hole and try to make room to get personnel down there. We'll have a welder down there tonight fixing the leak, hopefully, and it should be done sometime this evening, and hopefully by morning, if all goes well, service will be restored to that area. So that's my two reports. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay.
I have one quick comment. This is really directed to our communications staff. This is down the street from where I live, near Club Sport. And the messaging that was going on internet news for local news, especially with Patch, was always referencing the police department, and the police department said, we really don't know what's going on. But there was never any reference to ACWD, even though we had communication from Shireen Gonzalez to the board saying what was going on, but it wasn't in the actual local news in anything that I read. So I'm wondering if we could try to see how to make the connection there to the local news. Patch was one of them that put out a bunch of stories, but never posted any update from ACWD.
So we did post numerous social media posts of our own, as well as Twitter. Yeah, Patch is tough, but we did issue a media release, and we'll follow up and see if we can make that a little tighter.
Yeah, that would be good.
I think that's a really good point, because I actually got all the tweets from Shireen, and I got all reach. So we actually did a really good job getting the information out. So I think what we need to figure out is how to get East Bay Times and the Patch to pick us up. Right.
The Patch is difficult because there's no centralized element, it's like a
But East Bay Times
paper.
actually did
But
an
how
article
is
on
it that they're getting updates from the police?
Nixle.
Oh, they're
okay.
just taking it from Nixle.
I see.
In fact,
I got that
I received a Nixle report, because I received those, and walked down to Andy's office because it's a water main break, and asked Andy, what's going on? And Andy's like, what are you talking about? Police posted on Nixle before they even called us, before we got notified. There was a little gap there. So it was that Nixle stuff can be very quick.
Yep.
So, yeah, I got the text. By the time I walked down to Andy's, we still didn't get notified. By the time I got down to DMD, then they knew. That's how fast the information sometimes is moving. So, yeah, but we will look into, obviously there's an opportunity to tie in better with the Patch.
Do we know how it was affected, how they did it, how they damaged it? It's kind of deep.
I believe my understanding is there was maybe communications there boring, probably doing a boring underneath the creek and hit it.
Yeah, that was my question too, because we're 14 feet deep. Who's going to be deeper than us? But somebody wants to bore across the street. They go down deep, thinking they're deep enough, and apparently they may not have been. It's the Wild West out there sometimes.
Okay. On the PG&E issue, I would encourage us to draft a memo or a record of lessons learned and ideas that we've encountered, so you document This is a relatively unique regulatory contingency that we had never experienced before, and I think one of those things is to know where PG&E's sections are. So if, I don't know that we ever had that as a document in our files, so if something goes out, we know what area is impacted.
Yeah, I think a lot of entities are learning as a result of this exercise, and I think what we can do is at a future operations committee meeting, we'll share what insights we received, and then you'll have that in your board packet as well.
Yeah.
And obviously, we share that internally as well with staff.
Yeah. But a methodology to document the lessons learned.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe we're back to...
Okay, one last item.
Back to our N3 ranch again?
No.
No.
Sorry. Mr. Stevenson has a brief report he would like to give on related to some recent district cybersecurity efforts that we're doing regarding dual factor authorization. Yeah.
Yeah, I can be very quick, and just as Mr. Shaver points out, in our efforts to continuously increase our cybersecurity protections, the district is moving toward multi-factor authentication for applications that access the district's IT systems remotely. And so this is going on currently, but we know the board accesses certain IT systems remotely too, and so we want to make sure that you are set up. And so we'll be sending the board additional information about this, and we'll be asking that the board please bring along with you to your next committee appointment your district-issued devices, your cell phone, and your Surface, and we can help you get set up with everything you need at that time. So we'll send you additional information, but I just wanted to mention that here tonight just to kick it off. That's all I've got.
Which application are we using for MFA?
We're using Duo.
Okay. So
Let me mention one thing here real quick. I sent a couple of email exchanges between myself and staff after the attacks on Union City and Livermore on their computer systems. And there was recently a 60-minute story for the beginning of their new season, which was reporting on these very attacks against government agencies. And it was a really good expose on the ransomware situations that are facing the smaller government agencies. They're not going after the largest ones. And we would be considered small to medium. And one thing I would like to have evaluated in the Engineering and IT Committee is whether it might be worthwhile putting out an RFP for one of the ransomware companies that can act like as a backbench security process for us. A lot of Silicon Valley firms are employing this now, and I just think it's worth evaluating. Maybe put out an RFP to see what kind of responses you get back. And that's not to say that I don't believe our staff is doing a good job. I think they're doing a great job. But it doesn't hurt to have an extra little bit of insurance. And I mentioned to some of our IT folks recently that, just in passing, that it's one thing to have insurance like we do through JPIA or Sidrama for cybersecurity protection or ransomware, but it's another to invest and have the insurance of an outside firm that specializes in this. And so as a board member, I'm really not quite familiar with what the cost of doing something like that is, but I do encounter other companies in Silicon Valley, even very small ones, where they're trying to protect their IP and their patent solicitations, everything like that, that it just might be prudent on our part to take a look at that.
Yeah, understood. And staff plans to share much of what we're working on along those lines and others with the board at the November board meeting.
Great.
So
And
we're
of course,
planning
we
on-
continue to keep the committee updated as well.
So, because it's a security-related item, we'll plan on having a closed session, just to give the board an idea of what we're doing, and certainly we can follow up on that discussion.
Yeah, and as I mentioned in my emails, I don't think we've heard the full story of what happened at Union City or in Livermore, but through some folks I know on our GIS, Tri-City GIS committee,
Mm-hmm.
I've heard backdoor that there was ransomware involved, but that people don't want to disclose that to the public.
Right, so this is also some information we could share at the appropriate venue, because we don't really want to daylight our security-related issues.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Shaver, can I provide one more update?
Sure.
I just want to give the latest on the PG&E power. I've just been notified that PG&E has given the all clear for Alameda County, so they're in their process of doing their inspections. And although they claim it could take up to 5 days, that's statewide, and some customers in the county have already had their service returned, so we're hoping it'll be over quickly. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, the old under promise and over deliver model.
Yep.
Okay, so that concludes the GM report items, I believe. We can go back to our,
N3.
well, we could go back to the N3 cattle ranch items.
Could I request a 5-minute recess?
We return at minute 35.
Good idea.
Okay.
7:30. Out of it. Okay, moving back
environment is priceless.
to item number, moving back to the general manager's report.
6.4.1.
6.4.
Like you said, I'll just grab that. I might only just...
Entry range. Back in session at, a little later. Come back here at minute 38. Back up. There we go. Back to the MP range. We were finished, I believe, with the general manager was finished with his comments regarding this.
General Manager provided an update on activities since the September 12th board meeting, and then encouraged the board to discuss the N3 ranch. And as I mentioned, depending on where we go, it may be useful for me to talk about potential future activities, but I think the board should discuss how you all are feeling about the N3 ranch before I provide any suggestions.
Okay. Shall we start? Director Weed.
Okay. First of all, it was noted that we're requesting a value assessment of the property. I suggest that is really important for a public agency, and the attorneys, I'm sure, can give us guidance on what limitations we have and restrictions we have, if any, of going above the assessed valuation in purchasing the property. So if that becomes a legal restriction on us, either in bond money or other, just, so we don't run into the gift of public funds issue and overpaying for a piece of property. And there may be ways around it. There may be other technical issues, and there could be financing issues. That said, I would hope that, I believe that philosophically that watersheds should be owned by water districts. They can, and then leased, if appropriate, to various park and environmental groups. That we have a vested interest in the watershed. That it may or may not, may quickly come into conflict with some of the recreation and environmental issues as they evolve and having ownership. It is particularly important to own the reservoir itself, and that is a small percentage of this. There are additional players. DWR has not been brought into the table yet, and I would encourage them to be noted. That the Del Valle Reservoir, it was noted that there have been some other proposals for it, which have the potential of being evaluated. It's my understanding that in the late 90s, the above Del Valle dam was evaluated to the extent that they actually went out and marked the grounds as to where that dam would be built. And there were some discussions in the, particularly in the Tri-Valley area, as to how that would come about, if at all. And one of the issues was the flooding of the M3 ranch. Director Sethy is making some proposals. I understand that I would be supportive of. I would encourage, or the only caveat I would say is if the word green is used, that may actually cloud the economic potential for the property and make it more difficult to achieve the goal of obtaining and acquiring a watershed. The individuals that do own watersheds covet them. San Francisco's 38,000 acres in Alameda County with no deed restrictions at all, or environmental restrictions, has turned out to be an extraordinary source of value and wealth to the city and county of San Francisco. San Jose water is the most stable and economically sufficient business on the S&P 500 because of its extensive land holdings. When everything crashed, San Jose water went up. And that is
the only stock that went up on the stock
one
market.
Day, yeah, during the crash in 2008. So those are my general philosophical views. I would hope that this does become part of a watershed, and I think as an enterprise district, we have some potential opportunities here to, when you have this much land available, to particularly protect your interest. We've seen that if we'd had the Prop 1 funding of $100 million, we clearly would have had the money in hand to buy the N3 ranch, and the Park District's issue strong concerns about the existing park would have quickly melted away, in my view, if they could have had access and control of a much larger parcel. We deal with some curious mindsets in a non-economic format. Thank you.
I'm going to make some very brief remarks, and then perhaps I could come back because I really want to hear from the other board members on the proposal that I put forward.
Yes, and just for the record, Director Sethy did send his thoughts to me, which I shared with the full board as a one-way communication. We are making copies if anybody wants to refer to it right now, and in case there were any members of the public here. But yeah, just
okay. So the brief comments I want to make are that my thoughts about the N3 cattle ranch are, in general, the same as Director Weed. I want to set aside some comments just about appraisals for a minute, because my experience in real estate over the years is that you can buy whatever appraisal you want, essentially, on a property. And so I'm certain that the landowners most certainly went through multiple appraisals before they decided on the selling price of this property. On the flip side, I believe that the interested parties, led by the NGOs that are involved in San Francisco, others, will certainly try to obtain the lowest appraisal that they possibly can. That's in their interest, right? I, in my own opinion, have expressed that I believe that the property is being sold under market value, well under market value,
because of the limitations on the interests of the selling party, that they want this sold as one contiguous piece of parcel and preserved for as far as people can see into the future. And so it's kind of a self-imposed restriction on the property that brings down its value. And I've tried to compare local land sales that are in the news around Northern California and this area close to Silicon Valley, and I think this property is being sold roughly about 1/3 below market value. That's my personal opinion based on the land sales that I've looked at. So I have made a proposal for ACWD to expeditiously move forward to acquire the property. I heard from the general manager earlier that this other group is interested in putting an option to buy on the property. That was my original proposal when this came up before this board. I said, let's move fast, let's put an option to buy on the property, a non-refundable deposit. Maybe it's 5 to 7% earnest money against the property. In this case, that'd be about $3 to $5 million that we're talking about of non-refundable earnest money. I believe that ACWD should purchase the property in its entirety. I believe that we are the only party of any of the agencies that are involved, water agencies or NGOs, that has the capacity to purchase the property all on its own. As I've mentioned to our general manager, I have gone through the CAFRs of our other local water districts, of East Bay Regional Parks District, of the NGOs for what the reserve funds for land trust investments. Nobody has the financial capacity, aside from ACWD, to move quickly. And by quickly, I mean within days of a decision by this board. So I would welcome feedback on the proposal that I've put forward. And I have a lot of additional thoughts that I did not include in my memo to the board, but can certainly offer my opinion and elaborate on. But I want to lastly say I am not dismissive of the group of agencies that are trying to put forward some kind of coalition to purchase the property, but I think it's a matter of time. Time is of the essence. And like Mr. Shaver mentioned, the key competition here is, one of the billionaire families in the Bay Area that wants a trophy parcel of land. And this is that trophy parcel. And they could make an offer tomorrow and close escrow in 30 days. But so can we. And if we want to pull in those other interested parties that are trying to form a coalition, my belief is let's exercise our authority, our financial capacity in Southern Alameda County, which is in our, part of our mission as an agency is to defend the watershed. We're one of the very few water agencies in Northern California that does not do watershed management. This would thrust us into a new position as a water district, but we're certainly capable of it. And we can move forward and do this financially without really any impairment to ACWD. This is something that we can easily handle, and then pull in other parties that may want to participate in some aspect of this property, whatever their goals might be. I'm not saying this should be exclusively ACWD, but I think we are the only agency that can act now and quickly. And so I'll leave it at that.
I have a few questions for the general manager. So the first, would there be an opportunity for the buying party to parcel up the land and potentially sell portions of the property after purchase?
Whoever acquires the property in fee, I would think, would have the ability to do what it wishes with it. So if that's the coalition, they potentially could, be as part of a separate agreement apart from with the seller, do all sorts of different kind of things, which could be divide up the property, it could be provide the different parties with different interests over different areas of the property. So all of those things are possible.
And as the property currently stands, is there any kind of estimate on the O&M costs associated?
No, we talked about it internally as executive staff, and when we provided some financial information at the September 12th board meeting, we guesstimated maybe $3 million or so a year with different resource levels, but it's really a guess, and it could be offset by potential rental or lease income for cattle interests or whatever. So we don't have a firm number at all. We don't know.
And the coalition, have they indicated exactly what kind of park facilities or anything like that they would want to put in?
Just kind of what I mentioned, sort of California's next big park, provide a backcountry experience, so I would think that would be keeping most of the park pretty primitive. Other than that, I don't know. ACWD, we haven't met with the coalition itself to get a better idea of what they're planning on and explore, potential different possibilities for ACWD. Certainly, I thought that was premature until I received direction from the whole board.
And then, what are the different financing options for ACWD, and how does that vary if we were to go in by ourselves versus in a coalition?
I'll give our manager of finance a moment to collect his thoughts while I talk on a macro level. But at the previous board meeting, we provided some potential rate impacts, which is kind of a worst case scenario, assuming that the district acquires the property in fee at the asking price and basically pays for it within a 2-year period of time. Obviously, there are ways of smoothing that out. We have sufficient reserves. You can borrow. There's other ways to acquire the property with relative minimal rate impacts, and I'll let John talk further about that.
Sure. So if we were part of a group, presumably our share would be much less than the current asking price, and I think if we were part of a group, we could probably just pay up front in a lump sum with what our share would be, and then we would evaluate in the subsequent rate process what the impact on our reserves ended up being from that relative to our policy targets, and might that end up requiring some sort of short-term, slightly elevated rate adjustment? Possibly, but it would just depend on our overall financial performance. There are so many assumptions as it relates to things like water demand, spending on various programs, that it would be hard to say. If we were to go and obtain the property by ourselves, so we were paying the full purchase price, I think we would need to engage in some financing for a pretty significant component of that, just to make sure we can maintain reserves today at a responsible level. And There would be a few approaches to that. You know, it would require a rate adjustment, I think, to cover the increased debt service. But you know, you could do that all at one time, or depending on the board's interest in spending down reserves somewhat, that could be phased in over several years. So, you know, for example, you know, our current long-range planning is a 3% per year annual rate increase as we move past the current 2-year cycle. So you may do a few years at 4% to slowly build up the revenue needed to pay the debt service. But again, that would depend on our tolerance for spending down some of our reserves. If we didn't want to spend down reserves, we would need to do it at once. You know, and so you may be looking at, say, something like a 7 or 8% rate increase, if it were 100% financed, of course, all at once in lieu of the 3% that's currently scheduled.
Okay. I mean, as it currently stands, it's hard for me to really make a solid business case for us going in as a single entity. I see more value in potentially going down the path of working with other agencies, part of the coalition that's been put forward by the Nature Conservancy. Are there any other coalitions that might be putting up a bid, potentially?
Well, you never know what's out there, but I have not heard of any other entities. And, you know, so we don't know.
If we are to look at coalitions, I would encourage us to look at an option which only had water agencies as part of the coalition, whether it be DWR, San Francisco, Zone 7, ourselves. Then you have a common interest and less conflict.
I would agree with that. And just as a retort to Director Akbari, there is not one watershed in the state of California that's managed in the proposed manner that this coalition is coming forward with. If you want a watershed that's properly managed, it needs to be under the control of a water district or set of water districts that can do it in the manner that is the business model for other water agencies around the state of California. We have those examples right here. Marin Municipal Water District managing its watershed up to Mount Tamalpais. You have Contra Costa Water District, East Bay Mud, portions of what Zone 7 is doing, Santa Clara Valley Water District. We are one of the very few water districts that does not and has not historically managed its watershed. A coalition of different NGOs and water districts and other possibly private interests creates a situation that is bound to lead to convolution and messy relationships over the years. That's why I really am promoting to the board, take control of the property so you have control over your destiny and your future. That's what's at stake for our community. Not some set of messy relationships.
When Los Vaqueros was being planned and acquired, it was joked that Wally Bishop would not allow East Bay Regional Park District on the property. They wanted to participate in the efforts, and they wisely kept the park district out of the equation so that the water district would own it and operate it, and then could potentially lease it to other recreational uses. But we've learned, as we've learned with some challenges with Quarry Lakes and even in other places, you want to keep it within the water world, operated by water people. Park districts, as we found with Del Valle, even on a lease basis, can take a non-economical approach.
I was at the Region 3 event to inform the board last Friday up in Grass Valley in Nevada City. And we were hosted by Nevada Irrigation District, which has over 250,000 acres of watershed under management. And it has been the principle of their board since their founding in the early 1920s to continually acquire land in the watershed. They work on a model of owning the property, which appreciates in value over the years, and they create leasing opportunities for parks and recreation and other activities within the watershed. That's the proper model to work under, not under some convoluted association pact of a dozen or more entities where we're like one of several board members in a room. No, you need to own that property.
I'd be interested in potentially going through this further at a special board meeting, maybe even tacking this on to next week's special board meeting, or not next week's, but a couple weeks from now, and making a business case for ACWD.
We do have just to remind the board, we do have a workshop scheduled for October 24th. That would be one potential date to discuss this issue, or we could always schedule a special board meeting.
So, I do have questions for staff. So I want a high-level assessment. So if we purchase this property, the 50,000 acres, are we going to get any new water or improve our water supply reliability?
So I mentioned on September 12th that we checked in with our water rights attorney, Alan Lilly, about, and it was really the opposite question. Like, if somebody else gets this property,
will we lose water?
Will they acquire
Right.
water rights at our expense? And the answer at that time, and the answer is no. They
Okay.
have, there's some, livestock ponds on site, but essentially the water rights in the watershed that ACWD and Zone 7 have would be senior. So my response to that question, based on the information that I have, is we already have the water rights. You could potentially, so there's no, that doesn't really
that's
come
fine.
with
That's
significant
sufficient.
water.
So the second question is, we talk about watershed protection. Would buying this property improve our water quality or assure, do we see, would it improve our water quality? B, would it prohibit or prevent any event that would catastrophically degrade our water supply?
Responding requires a bit of speculation.
Okay.
Assume it all depends on what the future land use is of the property.
Understanding the restriction due to the geography and the geology that it most likely will remain open space to a point, what would your speculation be?
Well, I can say that the sellers are looking for the property to basically remain either similar to its current property use, which is ranching and some recreational uses, or open space.
Which also one could speculate or postulate that if the use remains very similar, that means our water quality should remain the same. So the basis for protecting the watershed, which is to protect our water supply and water quality, should not be that big of a concern in terms of making a business case of spending $70 million. I am still stuck at the point that how do we tell our customers we are going to increase our water rate potentially up to 14% in 2 years for something that does not have perceivable impact to you in terms of water quality, water supply reliability. In addition, we will end up picking up liability, increase in insurance. Think about what happens if there's a wildfire on that parcel. What type of new staff do we have to pick up? Are we expanding our agency to include people who work on property management? Or are we hiring staff to actually take care of open spaces? And how about our mission? We are a water agency. If we do not have nexus to water quality or water supply, buying this land would turn us either into a recreational agency, a landlord that specializes in leasing things, or we become a property speculator. That's not in our mission. I just cannot see us proceed down to this path unless we see a nexus to water supply, reliability, or water quality improvement. This is a lot of money. We are not talking about a small amount. Even putting in an option today at $3 million, that is still a lot of money. We sit here arguing about a project that's in hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're concerned about it. We're talking about potentially throwing away $3 million just for an option that we are guaranteed to lose that money if we don't exercise. I understand that everybody did a lot of hard work. I actually am interested in the financing proposal. I thought it was interesting what Director Sethy set up to minimize the impact to our ratepayers, and I definitely appreciate that. But you still go down to the bottom line. There are no conceivable water supply reliability improvement for us in this project. There is no perceivable or quantifiable water quality improvement for this agency, as we can see, for this $70 million. So I really do not see how we could justify to our customers that we need to head down this path when we don't have a business case for it. So I think that's pretty clear that I don't think we should spend more time on this subject. Mr. Gunther?
So effectively, then there's no water rights to come with the property. We know.
I think we have the water rights, essentially, except for the minor water uses that the property uses.
We already own the rights.
Yeah, we own the rights that we would purchase, basically. We don't get anything extra. Just curious.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Just based on that simple.
We don't know of any particularly water rights that the N3 Ranch owns per se.
No, the only reason why I'm pausing a little bit before I respond is
we don't know.
Based on the water rights question, I agree.
Yeah.
Doesn't come. Whether or not you can develop facilities that somehow further leverage the watershed, I don't know whether that's possible. But on the water rights question, I think that's a fair statement.
I personally do not have a problem with the coalition. I understand the reasoning behind not being in the coalition. Particularly it works. We don't necessarily get full value out of the property. However, we're talking $72 million. I'd be curious where the public would come. At least we're talking about it in an open session. There's nobody here, but we're talking about this in an open session. I see no way where we can do this without going agendized. We have to. I would assume a purchase of this size, we need to publicly agendize this is what we're going to do. And we haven't really done that. We're just talking about proposals. Your proposals are very fascinating. Not vehemently opposed to purchasing outright. I think there are issues associated with that, liability, management. We don't do that at the present. I think our relationship at Quarry Lakes, and not necessarily bad. I think we do reasonably well there. I think watershed, open space, I don't see the battle. I don't see the raising of Del Val going to happen. We don't have the political power to do that, to make that park go away, which effectively what we're talking about. Granted, by doing this, the park would increase in size, perhaps. We just don't hold those political cards. Granted, yes, you're absolutely correct. Monetarily and from a water district perspective, absolutely. The problem is, people don't think that way. Our local politicians other than us, don't think that way. Heck, we can't even get East Bay Mud or Valley to think that way. It gets in the way. We're not gonna be able to do that. We don't have the power. In fact, I think having that conversation hurts our position on this, because people are gonna say if we buy it, they're gonna question, okay, Alameda County, what are you up to? We know you want to raise the dam. If we go into it with a coalition, yeah, we might actually, I mean, San Francisco seems to be interested in a coalition. I'm curious. They're certainly land owners, and they know how to do that. Maybe not that well sometimes, but in this case, I'd be curious if they're willing to do that, then maybe we could be too. Contra Costa, I think, they're looking probably more land banking. But, excuse me, in Valley, I mean, there's two districts that actually do own property. They seem to be willing to go coalition on this. I'm not opposed to going coalition, but I do think we need to, if we're going to continue, I somewhat agree that we kind of need to work quickly.
If I may, just as a clarification, Valley Water Zone 7 and Contra Costa have not been in discussion with the coalition, so I don't know if they're willing or not willing to go forward with something like that.
Okay.
Just
then perhaps as a coalition of water districts. I understand that we have to go. I think there's issues with the value of the property, certainly with public funds of the value of the property. I definitely think we would have to agendize it to push forward. The rate increase, we need to be able to target that down better. We just had a 4% rate increase, and we had 6,000 protests for a 4% rate increase, which I felt we could pretty much justify. In the end, we didn't have a boardroom full. But if we're going to do a rate increase based on this, we definitely have to be out there. We have to be public. Where I would come down on that, I personally am not 100% sure where. I see both sides of the argument. What I do know is I can't make that October meeting. So that becomes a problem. I can't make the workshop. Not at the moment. So I guess my position is we need to agendize it. The staff have enough information to put it on an agenda. Perhaps not.
President Gunther, if I may offer a couple of more thoughts. First of all, Director Huang brings up a number of very important issues, that I've been thinking about as well. And I would rather defer on responding directly to each one of those comments, but I do share the same concerns. I just, maybe from a philosophical direction, I am approaching it a little bit differently, that I see a new enterprise. I work in Silicon Valley and venture capital. I'm always working on new opportunities, and so I'm not afraid of trying to plan ahead and overcome those obstacles down the road. And I'm kind of reminded of our very founders of this water district. When they established the water district, they went out to protect the Niles Cone Aquifer 20 years before they ever got into the distribution business. And they couldn't even envision where they would be in 2040 or 2050. Back in 1914, but they still had some of the same founders on the board in those decades later. And so you have to have some vision as to the future. And I would ask this question. You don't have to answer it tonight, but I would ask the question, pose it to each board member. Think about it when you go home. It's taken us 105 years to get to the best financial position this district has ever been in. And there's hardly a government agency that has a debt capacity ratio of somewhere near 6. We have so much earned equity in this agency right now. I ask myself, how do we want to exercise that? What else would we do with that earned capacity that our ratepayers have earned? To me, I answer it and I say, we owe something back to this community from this agency, and this is one way to deliver upon it. That even after we spend $72 million, we still have an enormous reserve of debt capacity to move forward with. This is not detrimental to this district. And so I almost see it as something that we owe. It's an obligation back to the district. This is like giving a dividend back to the district because we have the capacity to do it. We can go to the 30-year bond market. The Treasury rates this morning on 30-year Treasuries was just a little bit above 2%. After we issue a bond, after inflation, we're close to spending zero interest on the principal that we're taking out on behalf of the community. So this is not going to be an impairment on the district. We have enough reserves. We can rely on our rate stabilization fund. We can dip into that. We could do something that is between 0 and 1% rate increase per year for a few years to absorb it. It will hardly be identifiable in the community. I also would ask you this. This district has invested $78 million in putting in fish ladders and fish screens on Alameda Creek. Are we not up to it? Can we not man up to spending $72 million to protect a significant, substantial portion of the Alameda Creek watershed? Lastly, as I said, I'm not dismissive of a coalition. We need to think of who the competition is here. It's billionaires or billionaire families that can come in instantly and close in 30 days. I believe that the risk to a coalition that's trying to form right now is that they're never going to get to the finish line. But we singularly have that ability to close on this property and then bring in other parties. And then we're in control of our own destiny. While I was up at the Region 3 conference, I was learning from not only Nevada Irrigation District, but Placer County Water Agency and others about how they're bringing in corporate grants because major corporations, the Fortune 500, are getting into the business of wanting to help affect climate change. They're offering grants for environmental sustainability. Coca-Cola just gave NID a $1 million grant just to clear out a small portion of forest, and other major corporations. We have so many opportunities that are available to us, including working with the Nature Conservancy after we take control of the property. And even if we spend $72 million, less than what we spent on the creek so far, at a fraction of the cost of what other land is selling for in the area, we can still pull in those NGOs and other partners as we wish down the road. I would say that this is very similar to the model that we've been working on Alameda Creek, where we've had the Alameda Creek Fisheries Working Group, where ACWD's been the focal point for the funding, pulling together all the NGOs and others. I said lastly, but I'm going to do another lastly. I was the presenter at the Alameda Creek Alliance a couple of weeks ago at their annual picnic. And I spent 4 hours there, and they gave me 1 hour to present on ACWD, and I got quite a few questions, including about our interest in the N3 Ranch. And I said, well, what do you think? Everybody said unanimously, we would encourage ACWD to acquire that property. and take the lead on it. I have been asking other elected officials in our community over the last month and other board members from other water districts, what do they think? I haven't had one person say no. In fact, Sarah Palmer from Zone 7 was with me on Friday. We were busmates on our field trip. I said, how do you feel about it? She said, I'm fully supportive of acquiring that property. Either ACW takes the lead and Zone 7 follows suit behind you in some way, but she said, you can feel assured that our board is in favor of this, and our board members will back ACWD. So I haven't talked to one elected official in our community, Tri-City community, that says, don't do this. And I believe we have the ability to go out and sell this to the public and not act like, we're chicken about the situation. We need to act like grown-ups here and look at the future and take a big step forward.
Yeah.
I would say that I do take exception of being called as a child or chicken. I will admit to born in a year old chicken, but I would think that taking into account
I will withdraw that word. I will say weak.
I think it's an adult decision to take into the account the desire and impact to our customers. We are elected by them. Of course, Zone 7 would say, I am behind you. Ask Ms. Palmer, would she be willing to put $35 million on the table along with the liability of the additional O&M costs? I am going to guess the Zone 7 board would have a very different answer. You're asking our customers to pay for the land, and they will reap the benefit and help in kind in some way. We are talking about actual dollar amount here, right? I am back to what does our customers get? Remember, this land has been perhaps overappraised. It does not have an eco opinion on it. It is entirely possible if we purchase this property, we have a survey, most of the land would not be usable. The value of this land would be potentially much less than what happened to us. We end up with a piece of property that has much decreased value that we have to pay to maintain. Our customers will end up with a white elephant with no upside. I think it's an adult decision to actually look at all sides of the issue. At this point, there is no business case. I understand there are philosophical desires. I love protecting the watershed, and I will fully support Nature Conservancy in my private capacity to help out this acquisition. But as the water district, we need to think for our customers. Would it be fair to ask our customers from Newark, Union City, and Fremont to pay to acquire land that would benefit Zone 7, which is Livermore, Valley Water, Contra Costa County? Are you sure that's fair? Wouldn't it be more appropriate to have, let's say, East Bay Regional Park, who represents people from Alameda County or any other agency who has much broader basis, to put together a coalition to support this open space? Why does the citizens of these three cities have to bear the financial burden and the risk? I think that's where the business case comes for me. It has to make sense for our customers to bear this cost. At this point, there is no business case. I love open spaces. I think it's great that there's this Nature Conservancy Coalition that will work on protecting the open space. But back to the start, what does our customer get in terms of business case?
Director Huang, I really have to challenge you here. This is not a burden on our community. This is like we've built up a savings account for many, many years.
That potentially will have negative interest, right?
No.
If the property loses value.
That we're using a portion of our savings account to acquire something that is of vast public benefit for our Tri-City community. And I will also add, having driven through this piece of property many times in the past, even cycling through it.
Same here?
Yes, that I sincerely, as I expressed in my memo to the board, this property is being well undervalued. If this were being sold, it could be divided up into ranchettes and you would have McMansions all over that property. There's nothing to prevent that in the future from happening. And so acquisition of this significant portion of the Alameda Creek watershed really is to prevent that from happening and to be true to the wishes of the selling party that this land be preserved for as long into the future as possible. And if it is subdivided into ranchettes with McMansions, easily this property would sell for $200 to $500 million. It could even sell for up to close to $1 billion where somebody had the profit incentive to come in and develop that property. And there's nothing to prevent it once it's sold to a non-public agency.
Well, or to certain public agencies.
I think it's, if we want to proceed, I think one thing we have to do is ensure our message is not that we want to raise Lake Delval. Because all it will do, if we put that message out there, is organize people to say, your comments, I get it. I know what you're saying. Noble. But if there's a message out there that ACWD has an underlying reason they're doing this, they will torpedo us.
I am not promoting that, and I did not put that in my memo, and I want to make it clear to the community right here and now.
I think we need to make that message clear.
That's not part of
that. If we do that, there is no underlying reason we are involved in this, whether it be ourselves or a coalition. Because if we don't, we stand a risk of having somebody come in and say, or organize the community to say, these guys they're being sneaky on this, they're being underhanded, they're going to use $72 million for a project that they can't do. And they will come up with a value on doing that, and we're going to have a whole lot of explaining to do.
Oh.
And I'm just saying, we don't have that political position. Yes, water district-wise, it makes sense. However, it's not going to sell. And it'll just torpedo any position we have in trying to say that we're protecting a watershed. They're going to say, you're not protecting, you're trying to raise a dam.
Okay.
That's what they're going to say.
I'm not promoting that at all. Let me add one other thing. Director Akbari brought up an important question. Is the property divisible after it's purchased? So if you look at the 4 counties in which these properties lie, a significant portion, about 10,000 acres, is in Stanislaus County. And so I went and looked up the county maps for Stanislaus County, the 5th supervisor who's in that area, and went through what is on the west side of Highway 5. That property could be sold in the future to Stanislaus County. They already manage a very healthy set of parks and recreation from east to west across the county. And so, you know, we may spend $72 million up front, but there are ways to recover the cost of that $72 million over time. If you sold the 10,000 acres to Stanislaus and they could hook that up with their other park facilities that are on the west side adjacent to this property, that might be viable down the road, and I think it would be of real interest to them. You have the interests of San Francisco wanting 5,000 acres. They can compensate us for it. We can work out a deal with East Bay Regional Parks District. There's a lot of creative things we can do once we control the property and to lower the cost over time. We can pull in those corporate sponsors that want to make the sustainability grants to satisfy their own shareholders and board of directors. There are many creative ways to lower the cost here, and you know, in talking in our finance committee, with our finance director, there are ways to mitigate any impact to rates, or in fact, have no impact on rates. It's our choice. And let me make it just once again clear, I am not pursuing the goal of this property for anything having to do with Lake Del Valle right now.
I do have a question for staff. So one more question regarding water quality. In the event that we're back to water quality impact, if the parcel is subdivided and McMansion built, will there be significant or quantifiable water quality impact to our water supply? And the follow-up question is, if there is, are we within our rights to ask for mitigation?
So, this is unincorporated Alameda County. My understanding is that in unincorporated Alameda County, basically for residential use, it would be 20-acre parcels if it was subdivided. A lot of the property is not it's really steep canyons and high ridges, so a lot of it probably wouldn't be able to be, it would have to be bigger than 20-acre parcels. So I'm not in a position tonight to be able to say if there would be any water quality impact to that. These parcels would be served by wells for their water, and they would probably have to have septic systems installed and meet the county's requirements on that. And typically the county coordinates well with us, but I can't quantify it now.
But if there are any impacts, we could ask to be made whole or have that impact mitigated, correct?
Obviously, we work with the county on a lot of different things. We can always work with them on this, but there's no guarantee of any particular outcome.
Understand. So this is back to what is the benefit to our customers. Is there additional water supply? Is there better water quality or water quality protection? We're back to the business case. Protecting the land use or piece of land is not the mission of this district. This district's mission is to serve high quality, reliable water. So I understand there are a lot of very good philosophical discussions, and I really admire the fact that the five of us agree that protecting the watershed is important. But for me, philosophically, it's back down to, should our customer be paying for this? Are there other entities out there that would do a better job at watershed protection, which from the sound of it, there is actually a coalition that's leading by the Nature Conservancy that will do a really good job. Regardless how we feel about their management, they will protect the watershed. At very minimum water impact to us.
Bringing this subject up, and it's really irritating me that you're saying paying for it. And I keep saying we have earned equity in the district right now. We have earned a savings account. So this is money that our ratepayers have saved up in this district through their
and it is their money. You are spending your money.
Yeah, and so what do you want to do with that savings account right now?
That savings account, my understanding is equity we have that's for rainy days for our reserve. Is that correct? Or do we really have $72 million sitting in the bank somewhere just earning interest? That's non-taxed. Don't tell me that.
So when we went through our most recent rates process, we identified that we currently have reserves above policy targets. But given the robust CIP that's planned for the next several years, we would, over the course of several years, spend that down to targets. So, if we were to make a significant allocation from our reserve funds for the purchase of the ranch, or really anything that's not currently in our plan, we would have to look at how we replenish that if we wanted to maintain the minimum targets established by the board for our reserve funds.
And our debt coverage ratio right now is well in excess of what it is for most water districts. And even after we make a purchase here of 72 or $100 million, we're still more than twice the goal of this district.
But
That's our savings account.
From my point of view, you're once again taking money from our savings account, which has been dedicated and tagged and designated to different projects. And then we're going to go out.
It's not. We have already
Wait,
in our
hold on.
we already have in our
Haven't
financial
we said
model.
we're going to spend it down, and we haven't
No.
idea how we're going to spend it down? Wasn't that what I just heard?
No. We have in our financial model all of these CIP projects for the future factored into our model, whether it's Los Vaqueros Reservoir, whether it's the Delta Pipeline, whether it's other major projects, water main replacement. It's all factored into our current financial model.
Right.
And so as our 2009 refunding bonds expire, we pay them off in the next year, our debt coverage ratio is actually going to go up. And we're so far in excess of where the standard is for the industry of 1.25 to 1.5. We've been growing over the last 10 years progressively as our finances have been changing. We're finally at the point where we're covering our depreciation and amortization, which we weren't doing as a district. We're becoming a cash machine at this point. And so our debt coverage ratio is only going to grow in the future, even if we spent the $72 million, made the investment for our customers, helped give them a dividend back in this community.
That investment, as I'm going to say again, is not making business case right now. And that money belongs to our customers, and I better not
Then
be
what
hearing
else do you
from
want
the
to spend
finance
it on?
department that we have money in the bank that's not tagged.
What else do you want to spend the money on?
We don't have to spend it. We could use it to modify, minimize future rate increases. We could use it to borrow less money for AMI. We could use it for some capital project that we have deferred that actually impact this district at this point in time.
Well, I think there's some issue here as to impact. And that's an important issue. I see the general manager talking to the finance people, because actually I see Director Huang's problem with this. And I see where you're coming from, Director Sethy. I do see where you're coming from, but I also think that's an impact. And that's where I want to take the next question is to staff. Perhaps maybe we're at that point where we have your proposal. Very interesting proposal. We haven't seen that proposal put into our rate modeling where it is. I don't know if it's 100% you're correct. I think Director Huang I agree with her in that if we spend $72 million, what impact is that going to be? I could see how maybe we could do this in today's market. It's an interesting market, but I'd like to see the staff come back on your proposal to us. I understand time may be of the essence here. I agree. There are people looking to buy trophy properties, particularly in the Bay Area. I would hate to see this thing carved up into ranchettes, which I could see that happening as well. However, I also think we have an obligation to the ratepayer, and we'd also have to agendize this. I don't see any way we can't make this purchase without putting it on an agenda. The question is when, and that's a question to staff as well. Are they in a position, obviously we're split, but I don't think we've seen we've seen a very interesting proposal from Director Sethy. I find fascinating. I'd like to see the staff's view on that. How does that affect our rates? Does it affect our rates? Can we do this by maybe initiating lowering that debt coverage level a little bit, maybe we were proposing out a certain rate increase into the future. I think we're to the point where we need to agendize this.
Right.
And we have some very interesting proposals. I don't know, I'm going to turn to the gentleman. Do you have what you would need to perhaps agendize this item?
Need a workshop first.
Yeah, so, couple of thoughts.
In a workshop first.
Pardon me?
It would have to go, hopefully it would go through a workshop before it got put on our agenda.
Well, I think we would have a special board meeting. It sounds like there's enough meat here that justifies a special board meeting to me, which would be open session, could further provide clarifications. And at some point, the board may be ready to go to closed session to sort of give staff parameters in terms of what to work with in specifics. And so it sounds like the board's interested, some members of the board are interested in a clear financial picture of district's potential participation. I also heard different possible approaches moving forward, things that directors might be open to. And in the spirit of one of my roles as your general manager is to try to help you find common ground as a board. You know, we had the proposal to purchase the property in fee. Conceptually, there is this existing Nature Conservancy coalition-led coalition. I also heard some interest expressed this evening on possibly seeing if there's some potential for a water agency-based coalition. So with that in mind, one approach moving forward could be, I'm going to be meeting with the general managers on Monday. I can explore with them if there's any interest in moving forward with a water agency-based coalition. I have some concerns about who would be on that coalition. Some agencies are easier to work with than others, but that could be something that is discussed on Monday. I could also meet with the realtor and get some further clarification if there were any questions about that. In terms of having a special board meeting, I've got a number of dates that I can propose. We can work through that through email or even this evening if you'd like, if you want. I know there's some urgency here. If you're interested, if you have your calendars. If you don't have your calendars, then I can send out an email this evening, and I would ask you to be quick in responding.
Okay. Can I, since the coalition was my concept, or position for the water only, I am concerned about those portions of the property that are in a watershed. San Francisco is interested in the portion that's in the Calaveras watershed, and their practice is not to share. They will own, if they join this, they'll find a way that they will own the property if past history holds and manage it. The DeVal watershed is about half the parcel. That is what is within the water coming to us with that portion of Alameda Creek. That leaves almost half the property that possibly, if we talk to people and try to develop this, I think it's important that the water districts control their watersheds. This is a much larger parcel.
Mm-hmm.
And there may, as was pointed out, Stanislaus County is not something that we need to have a long-term interest in. But we're thinking, and the other problem I have with the way we've looked at some of the discussion is in the water world we need to think on a long-term basis. We're here establishing the water supply for this community for an extended period of time. And you want to put yourself in a bargaining position where you're getting full value and full utility of that watershed. Currently we don't. We have some compromises, and it's costing us a lot of money to do some workarounds. The only dam that's talked about being raised is Calaveras. And San Francisco is now looking at raising 4 different options to raise it again after they've just made the first level. The issue with Del Val was its operation as built. So we'll get there. It's going to cost $400 million to find other water supply storage at $8 million per 1,000 acre feet in order to not to allow the full operation of Del Val. And even more than that, has other implications which go into the billions of dollars with recycled water and other things when you don't take full advantage of your existing water supply. So hopefully this goes forward. Director Sethy's effort I think is important. It will be modified over time like all initial efforts are, and we'll come up, and we got to think and not close it out, close the door on them on day one.
Okay. I was thinking in terms of moving, with haste, because if there is significant interest in either purchasing the property or being part of some sort of coalition to purchase the property, just trying to simplify and get a sense of where the board would like staff to focus its efforts on. And I think some of this information we could collect and have available at a workshop in the near future. And so that's why I was proposing the new concept here is, besides the district purchasing the property straight out, is in some sort of water agency coalition. But if there's no interest in that, and again, my personal feeling is if the district wants to be part of a coalition, it's got to buy the coalition has to buy the whole property, or we're wasting our time, because we received a very clear signal from the sellers. So if it was a water district-led coalition, it would be to purchase the whole property, and then the parts that are not necessarily in a watershed that we would be interested in, then you'd look in the future at some time to take care of those issues. So I'm just kind of throwing this out as a possible path forward, and I'm asking for some feedback so we can kind of have clear direction as staff on where we should be focusing in the near term.
So I do have requests. If the board want to go down this path for you to do more investigation, so be it. But when you come back for the workshop, I would like to have a concept to see if this appraisal, the $70 million, is even realistic. Are they high or low? Because we will run into the gift of public funds. If that's something that is definitely a no-go, then hey, why are we spending more time? If the sellers insist on 70 and the property only appraised for 50, there's no way we could say we are going to give away $20 million of our customers' money. So take a look at the appraisal, and I would also like you to try to bring back a business case. All right?
Any other thoughts, guidance, suggestions as I try to figure out what the heck I'm going to do?
Good luck.
Well, I think Director Sethy has put a proposal out there. I'd be curious how that looks.
Financially.
Financially.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be part of the business case. And I believe he's raised some very interesting concepts. I think also how would a coalition, obviously it's totally speculative because it doesn't exist, the coalition, could there be a water district coalition? Obviously, I think you're correct. San Francisco is going to figure out a way. But they're pushing in that coalition themselves. They see something. And they're going to figure out a way. They're going to control that property.
Own it.
Possibly own it. And maybe that's completely doable in that coalition. In which case, we're talking about less. I think we have to be very careful with the appraisal. I do tend to agree with Dirk Sethy. I think it could be cut up and developed for a sizable amount of money if somebody did it over time in the proper way or improper way. But whether or not that flies in appraisal is a different story. I don't know. The coalition's lowballing probably. Maybe they've got their appraisals that they have right there. We don't know. So I think the concept of purchase it outright, if we could see what that looks like. Possible coalitions and the impact, financial impact of an outright purchase, of course, will be part of that. You can take a look at it. I think I'm okay with a workshop. I just think, we've talked about it now for, 2 meetings. Let's put it out there. The public could come. They could enter their opinion so that if we do go forward, we could say, hey, we agendized this. We talked about it. We didn't do this in the dark. We've had 2 director comments on it. I think our positions are certainly out there at the moment. If we go to a workshop on it, it is a big purchase. I'm okay with a workshop on it. I'm still a little bit on the fence. Not totally opposed. Probably if you were going to pull somebody right now, and I'm in a coalition status, it lowers our cost. Yes, I think we could piecemeal it out ourselves, but eventually the question then would be, though, would the Park District say, why should we talk to you guys? Let's say Stanislaus. Why should we talk to you guys? You're not going to do anything with it. So would they do that to us? I don't know. Would they lowball us? Probably. Could we accomplish that same objective in a coalition? Perhaps. Would we get the speed we need? Maybe not. But I think these are questions, hopefully, that a workshop would raise. In addition to that, it allows the public an opportunity to say something. Don, I hope Alameda Creek Alliance would show up.
They promised they would.
I hope they do, because they're not here tonight. I'd love to hear what they have to say. I would love to hear the public say, yes, do this. My fear is what I'm going to hear later is somebody down there saying, why the hell did you spend the money on grazing land in Stanislaus County? That's my fear. I think I could probably figure out and justify it, but if Alameda Creek Alliance came down, that would be all the more support we need.
The beauty of Director Sethy's proposal is that if you go in, you acquire the property, and then you have the time to work out the details. Going in with a coalition, you try to work out the details before you acquire it, and that's a real challenge. There's an extraordinary advantage to owning this asset, which I believe you're purchasing at a discount. And then you piece it out. One of the great buys in the water world was San Francisco purchasing Spring Valley for $30 million. If you want to see what land they got, look at the map in our lobby. The extraordinary land holdings, much of which is now downtown Pleasanton and Livermore, more than paid for the deal, and then they still maintain some critical watershed both on the peninsula and 38,000 acres with no restrictions in Alameda County. With that, so when we did the Quarry Lakes, the district bought them, and then it worked out cooperative agreements with the Park District. The operational control of those Quarry Lakes we can work with it, as opposed to a reservoir that we're having challenges with now.
Actually, I thought Quarry Lakes was purchased 50-50, certain areas.
We're co-owners for most of it.
Well, in certain portions we had sole ownership, do we not?
Some smaller portions.
But in any case, but there were also some difficulties even going into that. Where you're a sole owner, it's so much better. Then you can wheel it, then you can do your deals, and the total dollar amount is not that huge in the big picture when you look at how much we spent on even fish ladders.
I understand, but politically, the question will be raised, or could be raised, by the public. Why are we buying property in Livermore, in Stanislaus County?
Well, I remember the political dispute on Seward's Folly.
I would suggest that I think
$7
we
million,
have a
outrageous.
workshop
I
to
think we would
discuss
go
this
down with
further.
May I put in a request that I think would help the entire board? Mr. Wunderlich has outlined that there would be certain transactional costs to acquiring this property. I think we need to understand exactly what those costs are, and I would also like to ask for like a zero baseline case of no impact to rates. Where could we draw money down in order to pay for those transactional costs? So there's no impact to ratepayers on a rate increase.
Okay, so
So if I can just step in for a moment, I think Director Sethy, I just want to make sure I'm clear on what you've been kind of how you've been talking about this, and I think kind of what you've been saying is that we have the debt capacity, we have the ability to issue bonds to pay for it. You're not suggesting that we actually have $72 million in our bank account today to just kind of write a check for it.
That's correct.
Okay. I think I'm seeing from Director Huang that maybe there was a little confusion on that point earlier in the
Because it
meeting.
was characterized as in we have a savings account, we could take money out. That's where I kind of go, whoa.
no,
Right.
the
So-
district does not have any undedicated reserves.
Right, and so
I want to make that clear
I
on the
said I'm
record.
viewing it like a savings account that is earned equity
Okay.
on behalf of our ratepayers.
right,
It's-
so
It's debt capacity, and it's only growing every day. Even after we make this purchase, up to $100 million, it's still going to be growing
So
afterward.
it's agreed that I agree we have the ability to borrow money,
okay.
period. I got
Yeah,
that.
so and the figures that Director Sethy cited, I believe in his proposal that was sent around to the board, were provided to him by finance staff in terms of future debt capacity ratios and how this would be impacted. We did have our financial advisor model a debt issuance in current market conditions. So, we do have a lot of the data that we need to be able to show this. We would be looking at a debt service payment on the range, upper end on the range of about $5 million per year over a 30-year period.
Okay.
And so really what we'd be talking about is how do we either A, raise the money through rate adjustments to pay that debt service, or B, I think the other side, what Director Sethy is asking for, if we wanted to do this with no rate impact, where might there be some options within the district budget and financial planning to make some reductions to accommodate the increase in debt service?
Okay, so basically, you're telling me we have to go borrow money. It's about, on the upper end, $5 million a year that we have to pay back. And there are ways other than raising water rates to pay for the $5 million a year.
That would involve
And
cuts.
in order to do that, it will be either cuts or pushback in our capital improvement projects.
Yes.
So basically, one way or another, our customer has to give either in terms of a rate increase or cut back in reliability or maintenance.
It would be a reduction in currently planned activities,
Right.
which obviously we wouldn't have planned if we didn't think there was value to them.
And that's where I was trying to come from, is you have to take that from somewhere.
And this also presumes that any operating costs perhaps are offset through lease revenues for grazing or other activities. So that 5 million is strictly a debt service and wouldn't
Right.
include any
And
potential
just
other
go
costs.
back to the, then are we going to become a landlord? What are we going to be at the agency? And I think, thank you for the clarification. I think we will leave the rest of the discussion for the workshop. I think we kind of kicked this one to death today, and we have some great ideas for staff. So go back and do some homework and...
Well, yeah, and the homework part is where I just want to make sure that I understand,
Okay.
so that the board is satisfied with the information that staff brings to the workshop.
Can I add a couple other things real quick, Mr.
Sure.
Shaver? Okay, so just so the board is well aware of this, we did have our debt advisor, PFM, not PFM is representing us on debt right now. They were earlier representing our investments too, but we've now bid that out to another firm. So we had the debt portion, debt side of the house of PFM come in, and we spent a considerable amount of time, Director Weed and I, in asking a lot of questions about our capacity and ability to borrow money. So that was a really interesting conversation that shed a lot of, it illuminated a lot of things for me coming out of that meeting. And what was I going to say? There were a couple of factors that came out of that meeting. I'll go back to my notes, and I think we can pull some of that information into our workshop. I also want to make it clear, based on those conversations, that it's not necessarily cuts that we have to make, in my opinion. There's some combination of things that we can do here that will ameliorate rate impact and where we go in the future, because we have to look at our growing revenue stream over the next 10, 20, 30 years too, and our ability to pay on $5 million of debt every year. So I would really like to ask us, look at this in the long term. Look at it for the next 100 years, 200 years. What are we providing to the community? And where interest rates are today, after inflation, we're not really paying anything on that money. It's like free money that we're taking out right now. So, anyway.
Okay, I think we're in a position that does staff have enough information to go forward with the workshop?
Let me just get clarification on a number of issues here. So, I still plan on meeting with the GMs. I will explore with them what they feel in terms of a water agency-based coalition. I think the board would be interested in knowing that information.
When you're asking for clarification, also, if they say yes, they're interested, please make sure that they understand we're expecting financial and liability support.
Sure. I still think it probably makes sense to continue discussing with the other coalition, just as to retrieve information. I will, I'm receiving mixed signals on us participating in that coalition, and they themselves will therefore receive mixed signals. So I'll do that. At this point, I'm not thinking meet with the realtor. I'm not thinking meet with DWR yet. And then we'll schedule a special board meeting. I'm thinking the earliest that could happen is October 22nd, looking at the calendar. But I know you're not going to be here the 24th.
October 24th. I fly out that morning.
Which date?
The 24th.
So you might be available the 22nd.
I'm available on the 22nd.
I'm leaving town on
Okay.
22nd. I won't be back till 23rd.
The next date is October 31st, Halloween.
Yeah, you could do it.
Maybe. I'll send out an email anyway. And then November 4th, 5th, 7th, 8th, and 12th are all possible.
Is there any time available next week?
If we go to next week, again, Monday is a meeting with the GMs. It has to be after that. Finance Committee is on the 15th.
We could skip that.
Okay. I'm going to be meeting with I'm going to be in Sacramento on the 16th. Important meeting with our, actually, water rights attorney. And the 17th is potentially doable. But, yeah.
Let me ask you, would you have enough time to do your homework?
I think we need to run financial scenarios. You know, I think we need to publicize the workshop. That was
Yes.
another thing. Issue a media release and give people
Yes.
time to attend. So that's why I was thinking, give ourselves, you know, at least, you know, a couple of weeks. But if the board feels important that it's more important to act and move very quickly, I think conceivably, and I'm going to be looking at staff and council here too, the earliest possible date to me looks like realistically the 17th,
17th of which month?
October. That's basically a week
From today.
from soon to be, a week from today.
I think that gives everybody enough time. I have the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority meeting that day, but I can skip that. Or be back in time. I could do both.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine. My only issue is the 24th, and I fly back in on the 29th.
So,
Morning of the 29th.
Why don't we shoot for the...
Available the 29th.
Everybody's available on the 17th, and the earlier the better.
okay.
Well, no, there's something on the 17th. I'm trying to remember what it is.
In terms of the media release, there's going to have to be some careful thought in what we say on that. In terms of, you know, it'll be transparent is what I heard, so it'll be a workshop for the board to discuss the potential merits of the N3 ranch property, and you'll be looking at things like, and I'll put a list of stuff down, water rights, water supply, financial, all these issues. And I bet you'll have some attendance at that meeting. And some questions, even from the coalition, the fledgling coalition that is formed. You may have some interesting questions from them. So it sounds like we'll shoot for the 17th.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I
I'm
think...
looking at finance, I'm looking at water resources, I'm looking at general counsel.
Yeah, I think we've actually already done some of the preliminary modeling on this to respond to the questions that came out of the last Finance Committee meeting. So I think in terms of actually doing modeling in the financial planning model, that I think that's not an issue in terms of having some internal staff discussions to see what types of things might be deferred to accommodate this type of debt service expense without a rate increase. You know, I would probably have to look at Mr. Stevenson on that one.
Yep, we'd need to look at the capital program and come up with some options for the board.
So, the 17th is doable, but extremely challenging, and we'll be responsive.
So the question for council is, do we have enough time for the meeting notification? Is it 1 week?
Yeah, a workshop is a special board meeting,
Okay.
so it only requires
Shorter.
24-hour notice.
Okay.
The question is whether if what I heard was press release or media release, and the question is, do you have the time to do that? But you can comply with the legal
Okay.
requirements.
So legal requirement is not a concern.
Correct.
Aside from that, I would actually rather have a meeting the week after if we could, but doesn't sound like it's possible. I'd rather give our customers a little bit more time after they get the press release to have a little bit time to think about it. I am going to guess it will take us at least a couple days to craft our language, send out the media release, which also means that will not give our customers a lot of time to think about it.
Yeah, the media release would likely go out Monday morning.
So Monday is not a holiday for you?
Not for ACWD.
It's a federal holiday. Yes.
I think it's better if we do it on the 17th because otherwise you're postponing it to early November, right up against our next board meeting. And I would expect if we're going to have a workshop on the 17th, we're going to follow up with some agenda item on early November board meeting.
And I won't be at the November board meeting,
Neither would I.
the regular one. But you'll be in capable hands with a very well qualified and competent staff. Okay, so we will begin the process for setting up a special board meeting / workshop on the 17th. And I think at this point I have enough information to give that a whirl.
And with that, I think we're ready to move forward to
Some board.
I think this is the record for the longest general manager's report item in the history of the district.
Okay. We have item 7 then?
Wait a second. We may have a problem on the 17th.
No, I'll make it work.
Okay.
Or else I'll try to take a day off, because at this point, because the way we shuffle the meeting, I've been working from home literally the entire week. Yeah. Let's see how accommodating my bosses are.
I can't make the 24th.
Yeah.
I have to be in Connecticut on the 26th.
Okay. Well, we will shoot for that. I'm sure it's going to be a continuing story, no matter what. So we'll just keep the dialogue going and see where it takes us.
John, you start off on...
All right, we're going to item 7?
We'll go on to item
7.1, the Region 5 Aqua meeting in Oakland. Interesting presentations, and I understand one follow-up will be a discussion, a request to talk from East Bay Mud to talk to me about a concept called zero tier. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity. Dr. Sethy, you have any?
I thought it was a very good conference, and you know, it's amazing. We're right here in the Bay Area, but I learned so much from what Contra Costa's presentations were about their water district, from East Bay Mud, from Zone 7, and from the board members, you know, as well as the GM. So, you know, you think you know most of what's going on in the Bay Area, but then you go to a conference in your own area, and you just learn so much. So it was great.
And I also
Our staff was very good.
Yeah,
too.
Laura Heides and Ed Stevenson both made excellent presentations as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. Special Districts meeting, which was in the morning on September 11th. We met up on Skyline Boulevard in Oakland and the East Bay Regional Park District facility. Interesting conversations, and as reported out of the prior meeting, the director from East Bay Regional Park District was really enamored with the concept of N3 Ranch.
I have nothing to add on that.
You're next.
Okay, so Alameda Creek Alliance. I, with the help of staff, gave a presentation. I want to thank staff. So I had my talking points, and I had all the charts and displays and everything put up at Chouinard Winery, where we met, and really extraordinary wines there for a small little vineyard, by the way. Maybe we could have an ACWD retreat or a future picnic there. Wonderful spot. So I divided up my presentation really into 3 things, one of which was kind of impromptu, so I'll inform you here. So I gave the status of everything to date that we've been working on projects on the creek. Having come back from the Region 1 conference that I reported on earlier, it had me thinking all summer that after we complete the fish projects, and I expressed this to the group there, that all of us entities, all the entities that have been working in the Alameda Creek Fisheries Group workshop, need to really think about what we do for the next 30 years, 2020 to 2050. And I've been trying to think of what the structure is for that, and so I said, I want to start a conversation with people here about what that new entity looks like, because probably ACWD is not the lead agency like we've been to date on the creek projects. But we need to think about Alameda Creek, Niles Canyon, Alameda Creek watershed restoration so that we have a proper fishery habitat. And so I said that the model for the Trinity River Restoration Trust was one model, and I mentioned a few others that I've looked at from other conferences. And they were really intrigued about that. That started off a really good discussion, and Jeff Miller from Alameda Creek Alliance and other members said that they're going to put some thought into this too, because by 2022, when we have the fish ladders in, what are those next steps? And I think we need to all be thinking about that. And then I opened it up for Q&A, just general, but very quickly the conversation converged on N3 Ranch. So I can say this, sincerely right now, they will 100% back us up, in whatever path we choose to follow. So I tried to make it clear that I was answering on my own behalf and my own opinions. I was not expressing the opinion of the board or the district on that subject, but it did lead to a very healthy discussion. And each time I've been able to present to that group, I've had fun at it, and I really was answering questions for 4 hours. They gave me 1 hour to present, but I was there for 4 hours answering all kinds of questions on the water district. That's my report.
That's great. I did have a conversation with Jeff Miller at the Roll and Stroll, and he did acknowledge that the water is too warm near Del Valle Reservoir and that portion of the creek to support steelhead. So, fortunately, it's not a fishery issue. I attended the Special Districts Association meeting, their 50th anniversary. They had a gala, which was outside. It was a subdued gala. It's interesting to talk to many of the smaller districts in particular, and from different areas, many joint areas. But the number of vendors is also the same, many of the same people, and some different. And it noted that the CalPERS had a very strong showing, both on OPEB and regular. And the OPEB personnel noted that they now have sub-programs that they're starting to pilot. They had a district which had a firefighters public safety group, and they gave them a separate OPEB account and bank statement. And I've always felt that we should be looking at bifurcating our OPEB program, one program for those who have retired, and another program for those who are still on duty, in service, and with different funding and different discount rates. Apparently that's possible, and it's worth looking into. Thank you.
One more question about the future workshop. It's a workshop, right? Are you looking for any potential closed session?
Look at me, I was thinking.
You're not there yet. How optimistic are you that you'll reach some sort of consensus and want to give staff direction to move in a particular direction at the conclusion of the open session?
Let me suggest we have it on the bookmark for a page marker for a closed session, because in the next week you may receive some proposals that warrant a closed session.
Yeah, and you can always cancel it.
You don't have to go to closed session. It's just there.
Potential.
Just put it and say if needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, I'm trying to think ahead of where we might find ourselves.
So just the parameters around having a closed session. We would need to have an open session first that would need to designate your real property negotiators for purposes of going into closed session. And then the closed session item would have to designate the property and who we're negotiating with. And then the purpose of the closed session is to go in and talk about price in terms of payment for a purchase, lease, whatever it is. So the scope of the closed session is price in terms of payment. So when you put that on the agenda, that's what, the only thing you can go into the closed session for. So we could do it legally, but I just want to be sure you know what we're putting on the agenda.
So it definitely, if you put it on the agenda, it sends a message.
Right, and if we don't know how much the property is actually worth, are we ready? Can you give us some sort of realistic pricing?
We're not going to have any information about realistic pricing by the 17th.
Well, with that explanation, I would suggest then that we wait for a closed session period at a later time, more definitive, because that would be a wrong signal at this time.
Okay, I just wanted to double check. Thank you, Counselor, for providing that additional information, but
Are we able to ask if the realtor representing the seller has an appraisal available?
I can certainly ask that. I'm sure they have an appraisal that says asking price.
Yeah, but you know,
if they have one.
Usually a good realtor will have comps that they can say, refer us to and say, you know, this is how we came and arrived at this selling price.
Okay, yeah, I'll ask the realtor. There's no harm in asking, and I'll have that information for you. The appraisal that the coalition has, sort of proceeded with, they said probably at least 2 weeks to get that, and that would just be a preliminary number and likely a range, at least initially. But we won't have that by the 17th.
Right.
And depending on how they feel about if they watch the video of this board meeting tonight, they may or may not share that with us. Okay, thank you.
The other option for a closed session is pending litigation, but that has not, there's no, at this time.
Not yet.
In this context, it would be potential eminent domain.
Yeah.
Which I don't think we're there yet for.
No, so we're not there. Nowhere near.
By the way, the power's back on in Fremont. Kurt has informed me, so we are back in power in the city of Fremont.
Well, I think with that, I'll declare the meeting over.
Thank you.
Thank you all.